Episode 571, Arrival in Devil City. Benson, the butler of the West family, observed the man and woman following Pete. The man was tall and looked quite fierce. The woman was wearing a red and white plaid shirt, a baseball cap, and a mask on her face. She was looking down at her phone and her face couldn't be seen clearly. Their clothes were quite simple, and there was no brand displayed on the clothes. In the past, Susan followed money and left her mother, so Benson didn't think highly of Pete's family. However, Pete and Andrea exceeded his expectations as they weren't like Susan. Seeing the two relatives who followed Pete, Benson subconsciously frowned because he thought of Susan. His expression didn't change too much as Pete walked over. He only shook his head and said clearly, "This is my cousin. She needs to visit Devil City for a job." Pete only briefly introduced Bessy and didn't say anything more. She seemed to be colder than Benson. "Miss Miller," Benson greeted Bessy. He initially wanted to tell Pete some things, but after seeing Bessy and Marvin, he didn't talk too much. It only took 2 hours to travel to Devil City. The weather in the two cities was similar. The group got off of the plane. The West family's car was already parked at the entrance of the airport. Since Bessy was Pete's cousin, Benson notified the chauffeur, who drove a BMW. After the group collected their luggage, Benson looked at Bessy politely. "Miss Miller, where are you going? I'll send you there." Bessy didn't expect Benson's invitation. She raised her head slightly and smiled. "Thank you, but we already have a car." After that, she looked at Pete. "You can leave first. Look for me if you need any help." Pete knew that Michael was well connected, and with Marvin beside Bessy, there was no need to worry about her. He nodded and said, "Okay, when I'm done visiting them, I will look for you." "Okay." She waved at him lazily. Pete left with Benson. When he got in the car, Benson couldn't help but look in Bessy's direction. He was surprised because he thought that Bessy would ride in their car and might even take photos. "There will be long lines for taxis at the airport, and it's not easy to get one now. Pete, your cousin, don't worry about them. A car will pick them up," Pete said. Hearing this, Benson was shocked. "Your cousin has other relatives in Devil City?" It took several years for the West family to find Pete. They only recently found a detective who managed to find out that Andrea was in Fairfield. They managed to find Andrea last year, along with Pete and Susan. Pete ignored them, but Susan happily left Andrea and returned to Devil City. They didn't find any other relatives. "She's here to look for a friend." Bessy told Pete yesterday that she came to find Noah. "I see." Benson nodded and didn't ask further questions. Pete's relatives were everywhere, and the West family was complicated now, so he didn't pay too much attention to Bessy. "You will see your grandpa later. You can visit your cousin tomorrow." Pete didn't respond. He was used to getting the cold shoulder. Benson initially wanted to talk about his cousin, but since Pete didn't want to talk, he didn't ask any more questions. They reached the West family house after more than half an hour. The West family's villa was located in the center of the city. It was heavily guarded, inconspicuous, luxurious, and somewhat exotic. It was worth every bit of money and not something ordinary people could own in Devil City. The West family seemed to be of some status in Devil City. Benson introduced the villa to Pete. "Your grandpa has prepared a room on the second floor for you." After that, he noticed Pete's expression. He didn't seem to be surprised by the villa at all. It was quite unexpected to Benson. Unfortunately, Benson didn't know that he had seen the large courtyard of the Clark family house and Michael's villa, which had a laboratory, garden, and golf course. It was difficult for Pete to be impressed by other buildings. Benson concealed his surprise and took Pete inside to see the West family and his grandpa. The patriarch of the West family had been waiting for Pete at the entrance. He seemed to be in poor health. When he saw Pete, he couldn't help but stand up, and the corners of his mouth trembled.
"Pete, you are back."
He was obviously emotional. This wasn't the first time Pete had seen him, so he only slightly nodded.
"Mr. West."
He didn't call him Grandpa. However, his grandfather didn't mind. He only turned and said to the servant,
"Okay, take him up to pay his respects to Alan."
Alan West was Pete's biological father and the eldest son of the West family. Pete quietly followed the servant in. No one disturbed him. Pete's grandfather, Edward, went to the study with Benson.
"Didn't you say that Pete had a cousin? Why isn't she here?"
His grandfather asked the butler in the study. Benson shook his head and hesitated.
"Pete's cousin isn't like Miss Susan. They left by themselves."
The West family only had information about a few people around Andrea. He understood Pete's family in Chicago. Although Andrea's work conditions weren't good, Pete was exceptional. Not much was known about Pete's cousin.
"Forget it, then. Don't worry about it."
Edward looked at him deeply and sighed.
"Now I'm thinking about how I can make Pete accept the West family. This is the most important thing now. It's all my fault. I should have investigated more at the start. If I knew that Andrea had Alan's children, they wouldn't have lived apart from us for more than 10 years.
Benson initially wanted to say that Bessy's temperament wasn't ordinary. He thought that she was a relative who came after hearing that Pete was a part of the West family, but it didn't seem like it. After hearing what Edward said, he quickly said,
"Sir, you must not say this. No one wanted the accident at the chemical plant to happen, but—" "What? Do you remember that Miss Andrea had a problem with her left leg? This time, when I went to America, her leg was healed."
Benson said,
"Her leg was healed?"
Edward felt that it was strange. Andrea's leg was struck by an unidentifiable disease. At that time, Alan went to several hospitals to no avail, but it was healed now? In the hotel, Bessy received a call from Pete after she put down her luggage. She answered the phone, took a shower, and then received a video call from Michael.
"Why did you pick it up so late?"
Michael looked at her gently. "I was just on a call with Pete." Bessy casually found a place to put her phone. Michael nodded.
"Wait for me for 2 days. I will go to Devil City after I settle some things in the laboratory."
In the video, Michael put down the test tube in his hand and told her unhurriedly,
"The temperature there will be lower. I have placed a jacket in the luggage."
"I got it," Bessy casually replied. Behind Michael, Daniel came over in a white coat.
"Bessy, are you staying in a hotel? Why don't you stay at my manor?"
"It's too far away." Bessy glanced at him. "It's an hour away from the city." Daniel was speechless.
"All right."
He rubbed his nose and walked away.
"How is Pete? Do I need to help?"
Bessy sat down. "My aunt honestly told us that my real aunt and uncle died for the 3 of them. I think he's investigating the incident regarding his father. I will help to look after him in Devil City." Whether it was the Miller family, Pete, Kara, or them, Bessy started to gradually let go as she couldn't let them think that she would always be there to help them when something happened. However, she still paid attention to Pete's safety. Bessy didn't know much about the West family and wouldn't forcefully intervene if it wasn't necessary.
"It looks like he wants to go back to the West family now."
Michael smiled.
"Tell him that it's better if he follows you and inherits the research institute."
Pete returned to the West family mainly to find out what happened to his father. The next day, Pete went out early in the morning.
Pete, where are you going?
Benson called after him as he saw him heading out with his backpack.
I'm going to look for my cousin.
Pete looked at the tourist map he found online. Bessy didn't have a good appetite recently. Before she arrived in Devil City, she received messages from different people. This map was given to him by Zeke. There were locations for food and leisure.
Are you looking for Miss Miller?
Benson was startled. Seeing Pete walk out without saying much, he hurriedly followed him. Pete and Bessy had already agreed on a popular street. It was a weekday today, and not many people were there. The fragrant scent of snacks wafted in the air. The place was very quiet. Bessy arrived on time at 10 a.m.
Try this. I think it's quite nice.
Pete ordered many snacks for her to try. He was cold, tall, and fond of showing off. The store owner secretly took a picture of him. Bessy played a game with Mary the entire night, so she was a little tired and ate slowly.
How is it?
Pete asked softly. It's okay. Bessy truly didn't have an appetite. The food in Devil City didn't suit her taste buds, and she also didn't eat much in the morning. However, after seeing Pete like that, she pulled down her baseball cap and ate more. The two ate slowly and chatted. Benson, who had been following Pete, couldn't help but feel that Bessy's temperament was too cold. Even he didn't dare to say much. Marvin, who was sitting behind Bessy, noticed Benson's strangeness and couldn't help but ask,
Are you okay?
Huh? Benson came back to his senses. He glanced at Pete and Bessy and hesitated before saying,
Pete, have you forgotten that you have a family dinner at noon today? If you want to see your cousin.
Marvin looked at him strangely. When he saw Edward yesterday, Benson didn't even feel this pressure. Why did Bessy make him feel so nervous? Marvin asked directly,
Pete's cousin?
Benson glanced at Bessy and paused for a moment before explaining.
It's Miss Portia. She doesn't stay in the West family. She's an author under Pinnacle Studios and has many connections with the West family. She doesn't come back often. If Pete comes back home, and she gives her support.
Episode 572, Devil City's State of Affairs. At this point, Benson explained once again for fear that Bessy didn't know about it.
The Higgins family is a huge household in Devil City. It's hard to make things clear.
Marvin nodded.
I see.
He had never heard of the West family, but he knew of the Higgins family as they had worked with the Clark family before. But Rosemary had been the one to liaise with them back then. Perhaps Terry and Christopher could hold a conversation with the Higgins family, but Marvin had never been involved in such matters. Even so, he figured that the Higgins family's place in Devil City was somewhat like the top 4 households in America. Marvin was in his thoughts. Bessy looked up and put down the spoon in her hand. She turned to Pete and said calmly, You can go back first. Things are not urgent here. Pete hesitated. Michael, Zeke, Rosemary, and the rest had told him time and time again to watch Bessy closely.
Pete, don't worry. Simon and the rest will be here soon. They're knocking off early today to have the afternoon to rest.
Marvin added as he saw Pete hesitating. Pete knew who Simon was. They had met before at the wedding. Simon was Noah's manager, and he had tried to get him into the entertainment circle too. Although Noah and Marvin weren't too reliable, Simon was. Pete felt more at ease knowing he was coming. Benson heard from Marvin that a Simon Osborne was coming to look for him, and found the name a little strange. He didn't probe, though.
In that case, I'll come over again in the afternoon.
Pete decided after much thought and left with Benson. Pete wanted to make things clear to Benson on the way.
I won't stay in Devil City. My major is in physics,
Pete said to him in the car. Benson looked up at him.
Pete, you...
Pete peered out of the window. Andrea had never talked to him about his father. When he first learned about the West family, Pete had been rather cold towards them. But 2 days ago, after he heard Andrea mention his father, Pete felt much less enmity towards the West family. It was also Andrea who suggested that he returned with Benson. Andrea said that he should know what sort of person his father was. Pete seemed a little lost. It was a while later when he said,
"Do you know what sort of person my father was?"
Benson went quiet upon hearing his question. He thought through it for a while before replying.
Alan dedicated his entire life to research.
Pete quietly listened. He was trying to piece together information from Benson and the picture he had seen yesterday. The atmosphere was solemn in the car. It didn't take too long to arrive at the West household. It was crowded and lively at home that day, perhaps because some had heard about Pete's cousin's visit. In the crowd was Susan, whom Pete hadn't seen in a year. It was evident that Susan was trying her best to integrate with the rest of them, but it wasn't so easy. She tried talking to 2 girls of a similar age. Pete looked away from her. There were many people in the house today. Edward kept Pete by his side and introduced him to the rest of the West family.
"So, this is my big brother's son. He's a good-looking boy indeed."
Pete's uncle, Alec, glanced at Pete and said what had to be said. Although Pete's return meant one more person to split the assets with, Alec didn't have much to worry about, for he had Portia with him. Everyone knew Pete's identity, but as a family member who had just returned to the family, he wasn't in the running for anything. If this event was held only for his grandfather to introduce Pete to the rest, the turn-up rate wouldn't have been this good. Most people were actually here for Portia. Pete listened to the murmurs and discussions quietly. Edward was very nice to him, but it was apparent that his health was indeed failing. Otherwise, Benson wouldn't have gone all the way to Evanston to look for him. The family banquet was at noon. Pete was punctual, just like Bessy, but Portia wasn't even back at 12:10 p.m. The West family didn't seem impatient at all. They waited on with unhurried smiles. At 12:30, the guard standing by the door finally came to report that Miss Portia was back. The groups of people chattering in the living room immediately got up and headed for the entrance to welcome her. Edward's health was poor. He was simply holding out these 2 days. Pete handed his grandfather a cup of tea, but did not call him Grandpa.
"Look, that's Portia. I'll take you to her. You can get to know each other,"
Edward said. "I'm sorry, Grandpa. I was out negotiating a deal, so I ran late." Portia was wearing a body-hugging dress. Her looks and figure were impressive, and her mannerism was elegant and learned. Upon hearing that, most of the people around pricked up their ears. Alec's eyes lit up.
"The deal with Pinnacle Studios?"
Portia smiled. "That's right. We've signed a contract and Mr. Higgins has been trying to get me to edit his scripts for him." Anything that involved the Higgins family or the Marshall family in Devil City was a rather big deal. "I thought you'd be doing well if you stayed with your first cousin, but it seems like there isn't much of a difference from before." Everyone's eyes were on Portia. Meanwhile, Susan walked towards Pete and continued, "That's Portia for you. Do you know the Higgins family, the boss whose words trump all others?" After accepting the $10,000 from Andrea, Susan had gone to Devil City with Edward and even attended a school to learn about etiquette. Pete glanced at Portia and then looked away. He didn't respond to Susan. After lunch, only the main members of the West family were left. Edward looked at Pete.
I plan to hold a banquet for them to get to know the rest in the industry.
Of course, this was all because Edward wanted to prove to the rest of the business counterparts that he acknowledged Pete and Susan. It wasn't a big issue, but it wasn't a small one either. Everyone exchanged glances. Pete looked at his grandfather and was just about to decline his offer. Edward covered his mouth with his handkerchief as he went into a coughing fit. Then, he said with bloodshot eyes,
Pete, if you don't agree to this, how am I going to face your father when I pass on?
Pete went quiet. He could clearly see that the old man's handkerchief was stained with blood. Pete was somewhat like Bessy. They didn't like being forced. If Edward was ordering him today condescendingly, he would definitely have refused to go ahead with it. But now, Pete hesitated as he looked at the condition his grandfather was in.
Let me think about it.
Edward could sense that Pete was wavering. He quickly nodded and said,
All right, take your time.
Pete looked at the time. It was already past 2. He got up, ready to take his leave.
You're going to look for your cousin?
Edward heard about his cousin from Benson.
Why didn't you bring her here today?
She doesn't like crowds. With that, he left. Portia, who had remained silent throughout, wiped her lips as she watched Pete walk out. When everyone had left, she asked her father. His cousin came over as well?
I heard she's here to meet a friend,
Benson said. Portia thought about Susan, whose reputation in the industry wasn't too good. She didn't have a good impression of Andrea's family. Upon hearing what Benson said, she smiled and commented, Here to see a friend, huh? Benson used to be prejudiced against Bessy too, but having interacted with her for a few days, he found that she wasn't the sort of person he thought she was. But even as he saw Portia's odd smile, Benson didn't say a word. Devil City Hotel. Marvin was sitting at the dining table, speaking to Simon. Simon sounded agitated.
Really? You have the original version and the autographed one. Really? Where did you get it from?
Marvin intuitively turned to Bessy. Bessy was sitting beside Noah. She picked up a video call as she spoke to him. Michael was still in the lab, busy wiping his glasses. Seeing that the call had been connected, he put his glasses back on and asked,
What are you eating tonight? Let me see it.
Bessy turned the camera to her food and then asked, What's with this new pair of glasses?
Mary's father gave them to me.
Michael leaned against a table.
He said the students in the lab are afraid of me. They'd be frozen by my gaze if I didn't put some glasses on.
Bessy was speechless. Was he that scary?
Have your meal first. I'll be back just the following day.
Michael didn't want to disturb her while she was eating. After hanging up, she found that Marvin and Simon were looking at her. What? Bessy raised a brow. Marvin paused for a while and then asked,
Sister-in-law, do you know Magic Lamp?
Marvin wouldn't be surprised at all if Bessy knew Magic Lamp. Bessy picked up vegetables with her fork. What is it?
Can you ask the boss why it isn't being continued? I've waited for years, but it's stuck at Professor Dixon's part.
Simon seemed uptight.
Or could you ask him what's going on with Professor Dixon?
Bessy calmly replied, He's dead.
What?
Simon widened his eyes at her. Bessy looked up. The professor is dead. Everyone at the lab is dead.
That's impossible. What's going to happen to the rest of humanity if he's dead? What about all the superheroes? Don't believe my sister-in-law's nonsense. She hasn't even opened Celestial Wolf yet. How would she know the plot?
Marvin was very sure of it. At night, back in the hotel, Bessy opened her laptop and stared at the login page for a while before slowly opening the browser. Episode 573. The comic goddess is burnt out. Bessy's memory had always been good. When she first created a Twitter account, Twitter was only starting to get popular. Editor Perez had gotten her to start an account to publish some comics. She needed money at the time and registered for one as Editor Perez wanted. Her account had been verified. When she played Trant with Scarlett in the past, Scarlett would go around snapping photographs and drawing architecture blueprints. Meanwhile, Bessy would be doodling. Ever since she was young, Bessy knew that she was different from others. Her friends were Brian and Scarlett, whom Harry and Luke felt were little kids. Celestial Wolf was just her draft. Bessy started drawing this comic when she first realized that there was more to Claudius and Bertha. Celestial Wolf was a sci-fi comic. It started off depicting the impending end of the world with an ordinary man, Wang Rui, as the protagonist. Soon, extraterrestrial beings visited and broke the peace. A serene town was left in shambles due to the invasion of the extraterrestrials. Rue Wilcox was thought to be infected and was hence abandoned by his parents. He watched as they brought his younger brother up to rescue helicopters, which were headed for the safety zone in Fairfield. Meanwhile, he had been left behind in the quarantined area. With the end of the world approaching, class differences became all the more pronounced. The rich and powerful ruled again. Rue didn't die after being left to his devices. Instead, he got rescued by a professor in the town. The professors around already saw the catastrophe coming and had been researching the safety zones. This was the time it was put to the test. Humanity's survival now depended on the results of these professors' research. Throughout this time, Rue, who often played Trant and got into fights, survived well. Under the professor's care, he even discovered his abilities. When he was out one day, he met Lucas Flake, the illegitimate child of a large household, as well as Phineas Soup, president of the student union. The comic was very long, and most of it was fighting scenes. The first part ended with the professor handing the research results to Rue and the other two. He told them that they had to take the documents to the safety zone in Fairfield no matter what. It ended abruptly at this point. Everyone's concern was whether the professor was dead or alive. In the eyes of the reader, the professor was the most liked character besides the three protagonists. Many of them were also waiting for Rue and Lucas to return to the main base and massacre the inhabitants. As the comic got increasingly popular, this genre became a hit. Bessy was reading the messages she received and the comments left behind on her posts. She had set her account privacy such that only the people she followed could leave comments. But she didn't expect to see a ton of unread messages. Bessy saw the private message box with the red notification and opened it only after some thought. The first message was from Editor Perez.
Magic Lamp, are you back?
The next.
Magic Lamp, why isn't there a second part? Have you stopped releasing comics?
Sad face emoji. Why did she not write the second part? Bessy's thoughts were all over the place. The professor was dead. All the faith had fallen through. Bessy inhaled sharply. The professor was modeled after Claudius, while the research lab in Celestial Wolf was conceptualized after the base in Fairfield. She wanted so much to give these readers a happy ending, but before she could start on it, her hopes had been crushed. Bessy scrolled down. Although she'd shut the comment section, she still received private messages every day from new and old fans alike. She didn't have that many fans on Twitter, just about 500,000. It wasn't much compared to those with several tens of millions. But in the comic world, 500,000 meant a lot. Besides the popular Don't Ask the Heavens. At the same time, in an apartment in Devil City, Editor Perez just finished showering and was on the phone with the same woman. Are you sure you can't change it? Miss Yates is a genius author. Everyone on the internet says she's the next Don't Ask the Heavens, the up-and-coming star in your hands. Webcomics are going to be the next thing.
Don't persuade me any longer. I'm not taking anyone.
Editor Perez smiled.
Back then, I was just an intern editor. But Magic Lamp didn't look down on me. Without Magic Lamp, I wouldn't be where I am today.
With that, they ended the call. At one point, everyone saw Magic Lamp as the rising star in webcomics too, but it was a pity that Magic Lamp left the scenes too soon. What for? The woman sighed. She knew Editor Perez's past. Back then, Editor Perez's mother was in critical condition, and it was Magic Lamp who helped her. In the end, she hadn't managed to convince Editor Perez. Editor Perez didn't have anyone under his wing. He was just dealing with miscellaneous scripts now. He put his cell phone down and took a sip of coffee. Before going into the other scripts, he went about his usual routine of logging into Twitter and sending a message to Magic Lamp's dead account. But today, as he was about to type his message in the chat, he saw that there was the word "seen" right under the message he last sent. Editor Perez was shocked. This was a surprise. Editor Perez could barely believe his eyes. His hands shook as he typed. It took him a while to complete the sentence and send it out.
Magic Lamp, you're back?
With that, Editor Perez's eyes reddened. It had been so long since Magic Lamp sent him a message saying, "Sorry," before disappearing. He thought that Magic Lamp was never going to write again and would likely never log into this account anymore. He expected Celestial Wolf to end just like that. It had been years since its release. Perhaps Magic Lamp wasn't as popular as before anymore, but there was still the glory of this masterpiece. Magic Lamp was, after all, the pioneer for such a genre of webcomics. The media would also often mention Magic Lamp when they talked about Don't Ask the Heavens. But there could never be a second Magic Lamp to come up with the second part. Some fans turned to other versions, but a small minority of them were loyal ones awaiting the original. In Editor Perez's eyes, Magic Lamp was almost like a god. A while later, he received a reply. Editor Perez had so much to say to Magic Lamp, but he only asked one thing.
How have you been?
This time, the reply came quickly. Very good. And then, thank you. Editor Perez knew that Magic Lamp had always been a man of few words. He leaned back in his chair and finally smiled. Then, he asked,
Are you still drawing?
Was she still drawing? Bessy looked out of the window. Was she? She had no idea. Her first 20 years of life had been rather perplexing. She hadn't really found her place yet. Bessy didn't reply immediately. She gave Michael a call. Michael had been working overtime in the research institute lately. At this point, he was talking to a few students very seriously. As he took a look at his cell phone, he took his glasses off and handed a test tube to a student. He stepped aside and picked up the phone. His tone softened.
What is it?
A few students seemed extremely confused when he left.
What's with Michael?
Michael had always been serious in his work. He was even stricter than Daniel, who was already known as a madman. This was the first time he left them in the lab and walked out. Michael returned after the call. He was holding onto his glasses but did not put them back on. Daniel came in with a report and discussed it with him. Michael undid the buttons on his white coat and said,
There isn't much time left here. I'll have to trouble you and teacher. I've got to leave.
Nobody dared to object. After all, Michael had been invited by Daniel and Mary's father to come over to help. It was only after Michael left that a few students asked Daniel, "Isn't Professor Clark leaving only the day after? What's with the call?" Daniel did not respond, but Robert casually said, "Obviously, the call must have been from his sweetheart." Everyone went quiet upon hearing that. Devil City. It was almost 11 at night. Bessy slept in that morning and was feeling troubled, making it hard to fall asleep. She sat before her laptop. She chatted with Editor Perez for a while. But throughout the conversation, Editor Perez noticed that Magic Lamp hadn't mentioned the second part of the comics at all. He hesitated, but finally said, "It doesn't matter if you don't intend to come back to drawing. If you feel like you've burnt out, just let me know. I'd rather you not continue this work. I really wish for you to take your leave at your peak." Editor Perez had no idea why Magic Lamp did not continue drawing, even after so many years, but he knew that Magic Lamp surely had his difficulties. Perhaps the fans were right. Magic Lamp had already given his best and all. Bessy did not respond immediately. She was rather frustrated and went to compete with Mary again. Michael had already brought Mary and Paul to 19 stars. It was all right to bring 2 members for 19 stars, but bringing 4 members was too much, so Bessy didn't take the rest along. After the second round, the doorbell rang. Bessy saw that the round was starting and said, "Hold on for a moment, I have to get the door." "Go ahead, we'll just be cheering for you from the sidelines later." Paul and Mary weren't even ashamed. The other 2 teammates were confused by their remarks. Episode 574, Top Tier Resources. Bessy had already opened the door by then. She thought it was Marvin reminding her to sleep, but the person she saw at the door was Michael. Bessy was stunned for a second. "What are you doing here?" Michael walked in silently. When he was sure that no one else was in the room, he kissed Bessy on the forehead. On her laptop, it had reached the page where the 5 characters waited for the game to begin. A few minutes later, the game started. Bessy wasn't online, so Paul and his 2 other teammates fought their hardest with the hands that they were dealt. Paul and Mary weren't that good in the game. They usually wouldn't play in the arena if they didn't have high-level players to help them. With Bessy, they were playing in a higher-level arena. Every player in this arena was particular about their record, especially those who exclusively played in this arena. As Bessy didn't get a good hand, she waited for her moment to strike. The moment she entered the game, she heard some teammates spouting insults. Teammate 1, "Did you not see my level?" Teammate 1, "What kind of strategy is that?" Teammate 1, "You could just sit this round out and let me win it for us already. Are you dumb?" Mary and Paul couldn't be bothered with people like that. They had seen too many of these players. Soon enough, they'd be taking their words back. Bessy, are you there?" Mary's character was standing in front of Bessy, who wasn't moving. "Paul, could Bessy have disconnected?" At this point, their teammate had been completely destroyed by the opponents. Teammate 1, "I'm going to report all of you, cheaters. You guys are in the way." Mary heard a relaxed voice coming from the video. Paul was already having trouble in the game. "Michael, Bessy, help me." Mary and Paul's levels were this high because Michael had recently helped them. Michael wasn't slow in the game, but he was not as good as Bessy was. He took the time he needed to calculate every possible outcome, and casually began his turn. 5 minutes later, Teammate 1, "Take me with you." "You guys can continue playing." Michael left the game after just 1 round. "No, thank you. We're having our final exams soon." It was rather late at night, too. Seeing that Michael and Bessy weren't interested in continuing the game, Mary decided to leave too. But she found something a little strange. Wasn't Bessy in Devil City? Both of them were accompanying Bessy in the game at night because they didn't want her to feel bored alone. What was Michael doing with her account? On the other side, Michael left the game and went to the shower. When he came out, Bessy was using her laptop on the bed. Michael dried his hair with the towel while talking to Patrick on the phone.
In Devil City, the Marshall family?
Sure.
He was looking at Bessy's laptop while talking to Patrick. She was going through some comics.
You're troubled over this?
Michael tossed the towel aside and sat beside her. He had one hand around her waist and the other on the laptop. He thought for a bit. The outline of the draft seemed a little familiar. He pointed at one of the characters and scrutinized it.
Is this the comic Marvin reads?
Michael had a good memory and knew that Marvin was always reading comics and getting told off by Patrick. He also knew about Bessy designing the bulletin board. Back then, when she created such a fuss in school, he could already tell that she had a flair for drawing. Now that he saw all of these outlines, he roughly knew what was going on. Bessy leaned back. She thought for a while and then asked, "Do you think I can still go back?" After the Rogers family's death, she had a hard time dealing with such a blow. Then, she found out that her grandma's health condition was deteriorating quickly, and she practically vanished from the world. Her initial motivation was simple: to make money. But after that, there was nothing to work for. That year, she slowly forgot about comics altogether. There were many inspirations for this comic. The president of the student union, Phineas, was based partly on Scarlet. After she came to terms with their deaths, Bessy had other matters to handle. She turned her attention to the Research Institute and the White and Miller families. Now that everything was more or less settled, Bessy still felt a little averse to it. She sighed. She couldn't help but think of the vast number of fans on Twitter. This was the first time she felt burdened by this. She had finished drawing the first chapter of the second part of Celestial Wolf. She was stuck at the last part, where she had to draw the professor's death along with the other researchers. It took her many tries. Michael patiently listened to her talk and then said,
"It's all right. If you can't draw well, you can always come back."
Everyone who knew Bessy knew that she wasn't scared of even death. But she went soft when others got too nice and mushy to her. Bessy raised a brow. "Who isn't drawing well?"
"Me."
Michael paused for a while and then kissed her on the lips. He smiled.
"It's me who can't draw well."
The next day, Pinnacle Studios. Editor Perez arrived early.
"Morning, Editor Perez. Stayed up late last night?"
The colleagues in the staff room were all rather close. Editor Perez said,
"Took a while to look through some scripts."
He dared not say that he hadn't slept a wink the previous night because he had been too excited. While his dark eye rings were obvious, his energy level was surprisingly high. He got into his seat and logged into Twitter. There were a few more private messages. Editor Perez hurriedly clicked open the chat and saw Magic Lamp's replies from a few hours ago. "Add my Twitter account." She then sent a string of numbers. It had been years, and Editor Perez had never known how to contact Magic Lamp personally. This time, it was Magic Lamp who asked him to add her on Twitter. Editor Perez's hand shook for a while before he got to it. The profile picture was very simple. Just a blank white image. Even the name was simple. B. He got accepted not too long after sending the request. Editor Perez said, "Boss Magic Lamp?" Bessy just woke up. She was typing on her cell phone while brushing her teeth. Only one last scene left for the first chapter of Celestial Wolf, Part 2. Will be out within a week. Editor Perez was shocked. This meant that Magic Lamp was coming back? Editor Perez jumped up. Editor Perez? A middle-aged lady stopped at the door. Are you all right?
Cleo,
Editor Perez said with his eyes lit up.
Magic Lamp is back.
Her assistant was shocked to hear that. She pushed her glasses up a little and asked, Are you sure it's Magic Lamp himself?
It definitely is.
Editor Perez was the person who knew Magic Lamp the best. Of course, he could tell that was Magic Lamp himself. He paced about the staff room for a while before saying,
I'll do the contract and hand it to the manager. We'll need some publicity for Magic Lamp this year.
He got back into his seat and opened a Word document immediately. Cleo smiled. You finally saw this day. I'm happy for you, but your A-grade contract might not necessarily be approved. Besides Mr. Higgins, Miss Yates is also a hot topic now. They're the two best-selling authors at the moment. The company's resources were carefully allocated. Everyone knew that Miss Yates was popular online at least partly because of her relationship with Mr. Higgins. If this was set a few years ago when Magic Lamp was at the peak, it would be fine. But so many years had passed, and Magic Lamp was no longer as popular as before. Also, Magic Lamp hasn't produced any works in years. Cleo looked at Editor Perez. Many people will lose their spark. Magic Lamp now might not be the same person as Magic Lamp back then. Editor Perez continued typing in his Word document.
I trust him.
Editor Perez was now focused on his task. When he was done, he didn't send it straight to Magic Lamp. Instead, he printed it and took it to the manager.
Manager.
Editor Perez entered and immediately told the manager that he was requesting some top-tier resources. Editor Perez wasn't a newbie, and he had some reputation in the organization. He hadn't done anything drastic in the past few years, so the manager was shocked to hear that he wanted to groom some new people. He took Editor Perez's document and was about to go through it when a woman entered. If Pete was around, he would have recognized that she was Portia. The manager put the document aside and quickly stood up to talk to her. Before Editor Perez was done talking, the manager smiled at him and said,
Editor Perez, I'll discuss this with you later. I'll talk to Miss Yates about the collaboration first.
Miss Yates was now the popular little princess of Pinnacle Studios. It wasn't just because she was producing good works, but also because she was very honest about herself on Twitter, including her life as a rich girl and comic artist, as well as her perfect education history and good looks. She was almost as good as a second-tier artist with growing potential. In that case, it was only natural that the company would put Miss Yates first. Episode 575, Ruthless Measures. In the office, the general manager was still talking to Portia. The two of them were discussing a promotion campaign for Portia's new work. Now, there was a lot of buzz about this year's film adaptation of The Realm of Gods because Film God, a figurehead in the entertainment industry, was going to audition for a role. Don't Ask the Heavens and Miss Yates were also very popular. People always put their interests first. Pinnacle Studios had just recently signed Miss Yates to take advantage of the hype surrounding Film God and Don't Ask the Heavens and promote her new book. Miss Yates was indeed a talented artist. Her art style was graceful, dark, and suspenseful. Pinnacle Studios had high hopes for her.
Okay, we will change the new promotion date to June 26th.
After sending Portia off, the general manager quickly took his phone and went to the office for a meeting. Such a huge marketing strategy required a unified decision in the company. Before he left, he took the documents he needed for today. In the meeting room, the planning department was standing in front of the projection and explaining the plan to everyone in the conference room. The general manager pulled out the documents in his hand. He listened to the presentation and read the documents at the same time. Suddenly, he saw the plan left by Editor Perez. He glanced at it, but his gaze paused when he saw the signature on the first line, Magic Lamp. The general manager froze. He had a good memory, especially since Magic Lamp was originally the company's main author. But he suddenly refused to renew his contract and gave up his sky-high payment. Even the second part of Celestial Wolf wasn't released. In the past, when the company just started, the general manager would be very excited when he saw Magic Lamp. However, now, Magic Lamp had lost almost all of his popularity on the internet. Pinnacle Studios also found several great authors on the same level as him. The general manager wasn't very excited, but he was a little surprised. He looked at the document for a long time. Just when the meeting was about to end, he stood up and raised the matter to the people in the conference room. The people in the office were all in the comics industry and were familiar with Magic Lamp, who used to be a famous author. Everyone looked at one another. Magic Lamp? Yes, Editor Perez is applying for top-tier resources for Magic Lamp. The general manager looked at the man sitting on the first seat wearing a white shirt. It was Mr. Shane Higgins. The most recent top-tier resources were allocated to Miss Yates. The 26th would be the release of Miss Yates' new book. If Editor Perez were talking about a newcomer, it would be out of the question. But it was Magic Lamp, who was once the top author in the industry. The general manager couldn't make a decision easily. Hearing this, Shane paused and squinted slightly. He also froze for a moment. Magic Lamp? Yes. The general manager handed the document that Editor Perez gave to him. It clashes with Miss Yates and Magic Lamp has been out of the circle for several years. I think we should give Magic Lamp a trial period. Beside him, a few senior officials nodded. Shane lowered his head to look at the document. After a long while, he looked up firmly. The first-level resources are approved. Please ask Editor Perez to see me. Hearing Shane's decision, the general manager was stunned. Shane took the agreement and went out. Outside the lounge, Portia was still waiting for Shane. When she saw him come out, she gracefully put down her cup, but didn't expect him to leave so quickly. Miss West, Shane's special assistant, looked at Portia apologetically. Mr. Higgins has another important event today. He might not be able to talk to you about the script today. It's fine. Portia smiled slightly and nodded. I was just about to leave to see my grandpa. At this time, Bessy was still in the car. Michael was going to visit the Marshall family to discuss business matters. The place chosen by the Marshall family was a golf course. Michael held a blue umbrella over Bessy's head and said in a low voice, If you're bored, you can look for Noah. The place where his reality show is being filmed is nearby. Michael didn't expect her to have the patience to listen to him discuss business matters with the Marshall family. Hearing this, Bessy waved her hand casually. Sure, you can go. This is the Marshall family's territory. Mrs. Clark can walk around as she pleases. The head of the Marshall family's polite voice could be heard. I just found out yesterday that Mrs. Clark was coming to Devil City. This is my confidant, Julius. If you have any requests in Devil City, please let him know. He grew up in Devil City and can't do many things, but he's certainly a good driver and navigator. The head of the Marshall family was a young man in his 30s. He was handsome and lively. Michael watched as Bessy sat down on a chair under a large parasol before putting her items on the table beside it. Patrick wasn't there, and Michael wasn't familiar with Devil City. Mr. Marshall was just flattering him, and Michael didn't think too much about it. He remembered Daniel's instructions and nodded.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. It's a small matter.
Mr. Marshall managed to secure his position at a young age, so he was definitely not weak. He only lowered his posture and spoke respectfully when he saw Michael.
Come this way.
The two went to the field to talk about business. After the conversation, Mr. Marshall respectfully sent Michael off and looked at Julius again.
Follow Mrs. Clark.
Julius nodded. After taking 2 steps, he asked a little hesitantly,
Sir, what do you think of Mr. Clark?
He was probably too polite. Hearing this, Mr. Marshall put his hands behind his back. A few big bosses covered up the incidents that happened in the capital, so the forces in Devil City weren't aware of the insider story. However, Mr. Marshall was somewhat involved, so he naturally knew about it. No one dared to mess with Michael in Fairfield. Even the Schuler family, one of the largest families in America, was destroyed by him.
That Mr. Clark.
Julius frowned.
It definitely won't hurt for you to follow her.
Under the sun, Mr. Marshall's facial features were very sharp.
Yes.
Julius was aware of Mr. Marshall's character and didn't question his instructions. When Editor Perez contacted Bessy again, Bessy and Michael were taken to a private restaurant that was extremely popular in Devil City. There was always new information on Twitter. Bessy casually turned on her phone and took a look. A contract document.
Magic Lamp, I've managed to secure the top-tier promotion and certification for you. This certification recommendation isn't easy to get. Originally, the company planned to give it to Miss Yates, and there was a serious internal dispute in the company. Recently, the industry has been under the spotlight. And the company wants you to start a new comic and strike while it's hot. I've negotiated for the date to be the 24th. Is it possible for you?
Miss Yates would release a new comic on the 26th. Although Editor Perez had no reason to doubt Magic Lamp, he was also afraid of the traffic directed to Miss Yates. That was why he wanted Magic Lamp to release something before Miss Yates. Otherwise, with Miss Yates in the lead, Editor Perez was afraid that her promotions would affect Magic Lamp's publicity efforts greatly. After all, Miss Yates was very popular now and had many fans.
By the way, Mr. Higgins wants to add you. Remember to accept him later.
Bessy pressed on the document. After a long while, she finally downloaded and signed the contract. Okay. After seeing that the document was accepted, Editor Perez finally sighed in relief. However, this matter wasn't over yet. He raised his head and looked at the people in the office. The general manager raised his eyebrow at Shane.
Mr. Higgins, the top certification was just changed last week. If it's suddenly given to Magic Lamp.
Due to the rise of web novels and audiobooks, Pinnacle Studios' app was the largest platform for comics, and it had various translations of comics that generated over 100 million views a day. The top certification recommendation was the best form of promotion, and it only appeared once a week. June 20th was the date when the official cast of The Realm of the Gods would be announced. At that time, Pinnacle Studios would have to face a scary outcome. The company had already quietly acknowledged that the next top certification would be given to Miss Yates. Who knew that Shane actually decided to give it to Magic Lamp?
Exactly. Mr. Higgins, Miss Yates is far better than Magic Lamp in terms of awards, popularity, and potential value. If the top certification is given to Magic Lamp at this time, it will upset her fans. Especially. Was it useful to promote Magic Lamp so aggressively? That was the suspicion of most people in the office. After all, Magic Lamp had disappeared since the first part of Celestial Wolf and was already past his golden age.
Shane slowly shook his head.
It has already been decided.
After all, Pinnacle Studios was run by the Higgins family. When the other senior executives saw Shane like this, they all glanced at one another and left the office. Cleo looked at Editor Perez and chased after him with a file.
This top certification won't offend Miss Yates, right?
Editor Perez frowned slightly when he heard him.
She has already occupied it for 3 weeks. Is she really going to hog it for a month?
Pinnacle Studios had given Miss Yates the top certification since the end of May. Cleo shook his head.
Be careful.
At the same time, the top certification promotion news was made known to Portia. She was currently having dinner with Edward. After hearing the news, she took her phone and went outside to listen to what her editor had to say. Her face was extremely cold.
I want to change the release date of my new comic to the 24th.
On the other end, Portia's editor was shocked and said confidently,
Portia, your move is too ruthless. When the time comes, Magic Lamp will have the top certification, but his popularity is not as strong as yours. He will become a joke instead. I will arrange it.
Episode 576. Top Trending Searches.
Magic Lamp really shined in the beginning, but unfortunately, he didn't keep up with the times. When web novels were on the rise, he disappeared and only published one work, so he was destined to be eliminated by the market.
Portia's editor said on the whole sarcastically,
I don't even know why this peasant thinks he can compete with you. I will arrange the rest.
It was the age of the media. Miss Yates' popularity was high and her writing wasn't bad. It wouldn't be surprising if she crushed Magic Lamp. Especially since Magic Lamp had been absent for several years and many people had a bad impression of him. If it were the past, Portia's editor would persuade Portia to change her mind as the top certification was fixed by the company. But this time, Portia silently hung up her phone. She didn't care about Magic Lamp. Right now, her focus was placed on the Higgins and West families. On the other hand, Bessy and Michael had already moved their things out of the hotel. Michael had some business in Devil City. After he arrived in Devil City, he arranged for someone to prepare a property near the downtown area, as Daniel was based in Devil City. Bessy might stay in Devil City to watch Toby's game and deal with the situation involving Pete. Already several properties were under his name, so he bought a house under Bessy's name. Although it was in the city area, there was a lot of greenery, and the house was soundproofed. When Bessy came back, she printed out the contract that Editor Perez sent to her. It wasn't very long, and she was too lazy to read it, so she just signed her name and let Marvin send it back. Pinnacle Studios HQ wasn't far from here. It was less than an hour's drive. Marvin took the contract and was about to drive there. Julius, who wasn't busy, knew that this was an important guest. When he saw Marvin delivering the contract, he was familiar with Devil City and took the initiative to drive him there. Pinnacle Studios. The front desk received the document and looked at Julius and Marvin strangely. These two people didn't seem ordinary. Marvin looked very cold and different. Julius was the confidant of the head of the Marshall family and naturally didn't have a weak aura. They didn't seem like mailmen at all. The front desk forwarded the documents to the legal department and looked at the door suspiciously. Ding! The elevator stopped on the first floor and Shane got off. He looked at the two figures in the revolving door and was slightly surprised.
What are these two people here for?
His gaze was fixed on Julius's back, which seemed familiar. Mr. Higgins, they are here to deliver a signed contract. The front desk said respectfully. Shane nodded slightly and went out without saying anything. When Marvin and Julius went out, he told Julius that Miss Miller wasn't busy recently, so he could return to the Marshall family. Since Marvin said that, Julius didn't return with him and drove back to his base camp to report today's affairs to Mr. Marshall.
How is it?
In the base camp, Mr. Marshall waved his hand to dismiss the men and looked at him. Julius thought about it and hesitated for a moment.
Mr. Clark and Miss Miller don't seem unusual. They don't seem like the heads of the Physics Research Institute. Could it be that he's a puppet placed in the Research Institute by the Clark family?
He looked extremely lazy, and she seemed to like drawing on a piece of paper.
Really?
Mr. Marshall put down his pen and said sternly. He trusted his confidant very much.
Continue tomorrow.
Julius nodded. On Michael's side, after Bessy moved into the new house, she was glued to the computer. Once she decided to finish the second part of Celestial Wolf, she was constantly thinking about the art style and plot no matter where she was. Michael usually left her alone, but since she was now in a special period, he remembered how she worked on her experiments all day and night. He especially brought her along to the Marshall family when he went for a business discussion. When they came back, she continued working. At this time, Bessy was sitting in front of the computer and looking at her drawing software thoughtfully. James knew that Michael was in Devil City and gave him a video call. Michael was currently cutting an apple in the kitchen downstairs. He answered the call, put his phone aside, and took a piece of paper to wipe the knife gently.
Michael.
In the video call, James also looked busy. Seeing that the call was answered, he put away what he was working on and looked at the camera. Michael put the fruit knife aside before holding his phone in one hand and a plate of fruit in the other. He said respectfully,
Dad.
As Bessy rarely addressed him, James was particularly happy when Michael called him that.
How is Bessy doing recently? Is her appetite okay? Is she adapting to Devil City?
After Bessy became pregnant, her appetite worsened. She even didn't eat much of James's food when she went to the Miller family's house. It was clear that she was undernourished.
It's better than before.
Michael walked into the kitchen and changed the lens to face Bessy.
That's good.
Bessy was drawing in front of the computer. James paused and said with concern,
Michael, don't let her use the computer every day.
I didn't.
Michael kept a straight face as he handed Bessy an apple slice using a toothpick.
She rarely plays.
Only then did James nod.
Take care of her, and don't let her be too stubborn. Too much radiation isn't good.
The Miller family knew that Bessy would only listen to Michael's words. After the two talked about daily affairs, James gave him some more instructions before ending the call. After hanging up, Michael finally put down his phone and fed Bessy another apple slice. He leaned on the side of the table and called Patrick.
Are the clothes ready?
Michael asked slowly. Everyone knew that the white coats Michael used in the laboratory were made of special materials. It seemed that he spent a lot of money creating daily clothes for Bessy. Time flew by quickly. Pinnacle Studios also started to prepare for Magic Lamp's second release and increased his popularity. However, the traffic of Pinnacle Studios' official account wasn't very impressive. Although the announcement of the second part of Celestial Wolf caused some waves, it wasn't worth mentioning compared to Don't Ask the Heavens, Film God, and Miss Yates. On the night of June 23rd, it was only one day before the second part of Celestial Wolf's release. Editor Perez's office. Cleo knocked on the door and came in with a serious expression. Editor Perez gained some recognition in the company because he managed to get Magic Lamp back, and he was in a good mood.
Editor Perez,
Cleo asked him,
have you looked at Twitter?
What? Editor Perez was working overtime today to help Bessy. Cleo took out his phone and showed it to him. Miss Yates' Twitter received more than 10,000 comments in just 5 minutes. This response was the same as that of popular celebrities. Miss Yates, a new comic will be available online tomorrow at 9 a.m. It was also on the trending search topics. Film God liked her post.
Wasn't she supposed to release a new comic on the 26th? When was it changed to tomorrow?
Editor Perez turned pale when he saw it.
She's a master, so she can change it as she pleases. Even Film God liked her post, so it blew up. I've told you that we shouldn't have competed with Miss Yates for the top certification.
Cleo shook his head slightly.
She's obviously trying to compete with Magic Lamp. With her popularity and her connections in Devil City, Magic Lamp won't be able to win. You have to be prepared. I think it's obvious whether the readers will choose her or Magic Lamp.
Editor Perez didn't think about that before. In his eyes, Miss Yates was a great master. Even though Magic Lamp was popular before, he couldn't care about Miss Yates. The top certification was also won by Editor Perez and Shane. It wasn't exclusively made for Miss Yates. Editor Perez thought that Miss Yates wouldn't be so narrow-minded. Who would have thought that things were beyond his expectations? Editor Perez's heart sank.
It's just a recommendation. Magic Lamp isn't blocking her path. But in her eyes, you just robbed her resources.
Cleo pointed out and glanced at him.
Not to mention Portia's editor has a grudge against you.
Editor Perez sat down on his seat, opened Twitter, pressed on Magic Lamp's name, and called her. The phone was answered very quickly.
Hello?
A low man's voice was heard. Editor Perez was taken aback. He had seen the contract information sent by Magic Lamp a few days ago, and learned that Magic Lamp was a woman. He and Cleo were shocked.
Magic Lamp?
Wait a minute. She's taking a shower.
Michael was the one who answered the call.
Call again in 10 minutes.
Oh.
Editor Perez hung up. 10 minutes later, Bessy came out of the shower and Michael gave her the phone.
Your editor.
Bessy put on her headphones and dialed Editor Perez's number. Michael brought over a hairdryer to help blow-dry her hair.
Editor Perez,
Bessy said while putting on her headphones. Her voice was soft and light. This was the first time Editor Perez made a voice call to Magic Lamp. In the past, he would definitely fawn over her voice, but now he was a little restless and guilty. Magic Lamp's return gave him too much excitement and overwhelmed him.
Magic Lamp, I've let you down. If it weren't for my grudge with Miss Yates' editor, they wouldn't release a comic on the same day as yours. I will help you postpone your release date by 2 days.
Editor Perez said in a low voice. 2 days? Bessy raised her eyebrow. It wasn't the first time Bessy heard of Miss Yates' name in Devil City. How was this related to her now?
Miss Yates is going to release her new comic in 2 days in advance and will start promoting it on the Pinnacle Studios app tomorrow. Even Film God liked her post. And it's one of the top 3 trending searches. The Realm of God's fans are also very excited about it.
Editor Perez smiled bitterly.
If you clash with her, you will be suppressed very badly tomorrow.
Besides celebrities, the only web novel author that could be one of the top 3 trending searches without help was Don't Ask the Heavens. Episode 577, The Release of Celestial Wolf. Well, Bessy didn't care much after hearing what Editor Perez said and just replied casually. It's okay, Editor Perez. You don't have to be too stressed. I'm not publishing the second part of Celestial Wolf for money. It doesn't matter if I'm overshadowed.
But you're not.
After hearing Magic Lamp's words, Editor Perez hesitated. He remembered that Magic Lamp published the comic a few years ago because of a lack of money. Bessy looked out the window. I don't lack money now. Let's release it tomorrow at 9 a.m. as planned. She was publishing the second volume of Celestial Wolf for the fans and all the researchers who were buried in Fairfield. They hung up. Bessy didn't feel any pressure. However, Editor Perez had a heavy heart when the call ended.
She's not willing to change it?
Cleo was still there and looked solemn.
Honestly, you will be disadvantaged if she isn't willing to change the release date. You've already planned to give up your group's God-level recommendation to Magic Lamp.
At the start, she tried to persuade Editor Perez not to keep waiting for Magic Lamp's return.
Yes, she's unwilling to change. Magic Lamp says that she isn't short of money now, but...
Editor Perez shook his head. This wasn't just a question of lack of money. If Miss Yates released her comic tomorrow, Magic Lamp would definitely be stepped on by her. Although there were many rumors now that Magic Lamp lost inspiration, she wasn't a beginner, and she had a historic impact on the comic world. When Miss Yates firmly undermined Magic Lamp tomorrow, her position in the comics industry would be solidified. Most importantly,
Miss Yates isn't an ordinary person.
Editor Perez sat on a bench with many thoughts on his mind.
She's always been the most popular name in Devil City. If she doesn't let Magic Lamp off tomorrow, she can ruin Magic Lamp and our editorial department without doing much.
Editor Perez didn't expect Miss Yates to be so vicious, but now that he knew, he really wanted to change Magic Lamp's release date. Not only did he want to avoid Magic Lamp from being crushed, but he also wanted to expose Miss Yates' weakness.
Why didn't you tell Magic Lamp the truth then?
Cleo shook his head. Editor Perez took a deep breath.
The reason why this happened was that I didn't consider it well. I will contact Miss Yates immediately and apologize. It's useless to tell these things to Magic Lamp considering Miss Yates' status. It's better to let her remain calm and focus on her work.
On the other hand, Bessy was unaware of what was going on. Of course, she didn't understand that a recommendation could result in such a messy fight. After Bessy finished the call, she scrolled through her phone aimlessly. After a long while, she lowered her head and looked at Twitter. After thinking about it, she sent a document to Marvin.
Marvin. Miss Miller, what's this?
Bessy pursed her lips and replied,
Take a look at it first.
Marvin took her comic and read it a few times. Bessy had been arrogant for so long. When she was down with the virus, she was strangely calm. Now, after being absent for 4 years, she was a little awkward when facing the fans of Celestial Wolf who had been waiting for so long. Maybe she wasn't as arrogant as before because she was pregnant. Bessy was afraid. She was afraid that her fans would be disappointed tomorrow at 9 a.m. Marvin read things very quickly. The second volume of Celestial Wolf was filled with content, but he finished reading it in 2 minutes. However, Marvin didn't reply to her for 3 minutes. There was no news from Marvin after 5 minutes. 10 minutes later, Michael helped to dry her hair, then she stood up. He put the towel away and looked at her expression. His smile was slightly constricted. He reached out to hug her and frowned.
Who upset you?
Bessy looked down. I will change it again. She put her phone aside and continued revising the comic on the computer. Michael let go of her hand and glanced at her phone. Suddenly, her phone lit up frantically. He raised his eyebrow and walked over to take a look. Marvin said,
Sister-in-law, the second installation. You managed to get the second installation. I'm so overwhelmed right now. Sister-in-law, save me. Life is a meaningless meme.
This was the first time Marvin dared to spam Bessy with messages. Michael laughed quietly. He wasn't worried about his overreaction. Marvin couldn't sleep at night after receiving Bessy's message. The next day, he chatted with Patrick on Twitter with 2 dark circles under his eyes.
I can't believe she didn't send me the second volume.
Patrick knew the whole story already.
Are you sure sister-in-law is someone who would hack someone's computer to steal a copy?
Marvin said.
Why does she have the second volume then? The second volume of Celestial Wolf hasn't been officially released yet.
Patrick replied.
Use your small brain to think about it.
It took Marvin to finally piece the puzzle together. The entirety of Twitter was filled with news about the Realm of the Gods and Miss Yates' new comic. In reality, the news about Magic Lamp's Celestial Wolf was promoted too. However, it was overshadowed by Don't Ask the Heavens and Miss Yates, so it wasn't as popular. Marvin, who didn't pay much attention to Twitter, wasn't aware of it. He didn't know Bessy's news until he learned it from Patrick.
Miss Miller, are you going to start promoting your comic?
Marvin went into the kitchen to get Bessy's breakfast from the chef.
By the way, Michael went to the Marshall family and wants you to rest up today.
Bessy acknowledged him lazily. She picked up her soy milk and said, "Promotion starts today." After hearing this, Marvin went to look at Twitter. The topic of web novels was popular, but it was only about Miss Yates's new comic. Marvin directly searched for Magic Lamp. Sure enough, news that it would be released at 9 a.m. was found. He clicked on the most popular result on Twitter. It was official news released by Pinnacle Studios' official account. There were only about 700 comments below. It was a good response compared to the average comic book author. However, the latest comments were an eyesore. "I'm just a primary school student," said. "Don't draw if you can't anymore. Isn't it good to just leave the first part of Celestial Wolf?" Lilith replied, "Honestly, I'm not optimistic about Magic Lamp, especially since Miss Yates is leading and Magic Lamp's era has ended. The popular trends in the comic industry have changed many times and Magic Lamp hasn't kept up. Heroism comics are no longer mainstream." Marvin couldn't help but frown. He went to his own Twitter account and replied coldly, "I'll wait for you all to cry and beg her for it." Marvin was no longer the same person he used to be. He looked at the comments on Twitter and frowned. After thinking about it, he sent them to Zeke's manager. Marvin wasn't the only one watching the news on Twitter. Pinnacle Studios editors were also monitoring the situation. They weren't surprised that Miss Yates was suppressing Magic Lamp. They only hoped that Miss Yates would belittle Magic Lamp even more. At 9 a.m., Pinnacle Studios office. Shane refreshed the Pinnacle Studios app. Sure enough, the second volume of Celestial Wolf had already been uploaded. Shane realized that the comments were very quiet. He liked a comment by someone called Supreme Cruise Line before taking a look. When Shane viewed it, he realized that he could choose 4D viewing by clicking a button in the lower left corner of the comic. Due to progress made by the Miller family, the 3D virtual projection was enabled on current mobile phone technology. It was just that the new digital art software was needed to create 4D comics. Pinnacle Studios was prepared to venture into 4D comics, which would definitely become the next new trend. But Shane didn't expect that Celestial Wolf would be the first 4D comic. His secretary beside him put his documents on Shane's table. When he looked up, he saw the drawings projected on the desk. He meant only to glance over casually, but he was quickly drawn in by the second drawing. 10 minutes later, the secretary lost focus for the first time in front of Shane. "Secretary, are you sure that there isn't any left?" Shane was calmer than him. He stretched his hands and looked at him with his bright eyes. "No." Only then did the secretary withdraw his gaze. He was prepared to search for this comic. When he saw the title, he was shocked. "Is this the second volume of Celestial Wolf? What a pity. he said subconsciously. Shane was about to look at it again when he heard the secretary. He couldn't help but ask.
A pity? It would have been okay if this was released last year or a year later. Unfortunately, it clashes with Miss Yates.
The secretary shook his head. He had heard of Miss Yates' revenge. Miss Yates alone had almost 80,000 Twitter comments, while Magic Lamp only had hundreds of comments. However, Magic Lamp's story was definitely good. That's why he felt that it was a pity. Downstairs, Editor Perez looked haggard. He walked out of the office in dismay.
What did Miss Yates' editor say?
Cleo looked at him. Editor Perez shook his head. Cleo also expected this result and wasn't very surprised. He only frowned.
They're going all out. Will Magic Lamp be all right? The momentum will start at 7 p.m. She's fine.
When Magic Lamp was mentioned, Editor Perez's mood improved.
I'm afraid she's still sleeping. If Miss Yates doesn't want to let her off, only the fans can save Magic Lamp.
Cleo sighed.
It would be great if Magic Lamp gets more views than Miss Yates. If there are many fans, Miss Yates's editor won't dare to be more vicious.
However, they knew that it was almost impossible for her to surpass Miss Yates. At the same time, after Zeke finished shooting an advertisement, he walked to the lounge and realized that his manager was in a daze.
What's wrong with him?
Zeke asked his assistant.
He seemed to be chatting with Marvin just now.
His assistant replied. Hearing their voices, his manager finally came back to his senses. He looked at Zeke worriedly.
It's over. I hope you can forgive me for one thing.
Episode 578. Expensive Gifts from Fans. IP was flourishing in the entertainment industry now. Now that national comics had become popular, the entertainment companies had turned their focus to comics. For instance, Zeke participated in the casting call of The Realm of the Gods. Miss Yates was currently very popular on the internet. As one of the screenwriters, she took the initiative to contact Zeke's company. This was why Zeke's company supported Miss Yates' new release. This wasn't supposed to be a big deal, but Miss Yates obviously had a team behind her. The team made Film God's support into a hot topic and brought views so it would appear on the hot searches. Today, Miss Yates's new comic was on sale, and the topic, Film God's support, was a hot topic again. It was the 6th most popular search topic, just below Miss Yates's new comic. Managers were already used to this kind of hype in the entertainment industry. It wasn't the first time Zeke had been used to increase something or someone's popularity. However, this time was different. Thinking about Marvin's phone call, the manager almost wanted to cry.
What's going on?
Zeke sat up and asked someone to remove his makeup. He glanced at his manager in the mirror. The manager told him about what happened. After hearing what happened, Zeke didn't say anything. He only raised his hand and asked the makeup artist to stop. He took out his phone and downloaded the Pinnacle Studios app as per his manager's words. As soon as he entered, he saw Magic Lamp's advertisement. He clicked on it and looked directly at his phone. The manager was paying attention to Zeke's expression. Zeke was a little dumbfounded at the end of the comic.
Zeke?
The manager couldn't help but pause when he saw his expression. Zeke seemed to take in a deep breath. The manager saw his fingertips pause in Twitter for a few seconds, before heading to Twitter in determination. The two hot searches were still in Miss Yates's favor. He directly searched for Magic Lamp, and what he found was Pinnacle Studios' Twitter. The discussion below had changed because someone commented that Magic Lamp couldn't be compared to Miss Yates.
Magic Lamp's popularity is but a fraction of Miss Yates's.
They can only hope to fail. Any top certifications and promotions are useless. They will continue to remain below us. This is the first time I've seen a promoted post not even getting 100 comments. Zeke scrolled down and refreshed Twitter. He immediately saw a new post by Miss Yates. Film God is a respected actor, and he always takes care of his own people. Thank you. Why didn't Zeke realize that Miss Yates was the one creating the momentum?
I honestly had a good impression of Miss Yates before, but the way she's trying to bring your niece down by using the power of your fans, you know that your fans are more aggressive than ordinary celebrities.
The manager glanced at him and couldn't help but shake his head. Zeke raised his head and smiled sarcastically.
We can only solve this problem ourselves.
He closed Twitter and said faintly,
Do you know what to do?
The manager hurriedly nodded. No one was more professional at controlling public opinion than Film God's company. Pinnacle Studios. Miss Yates didn't relent. On Twitter, Magic Lamp's new publication was overshadowed by Miss Yates's popularity, and even editor Perez felt that something was wrong. Miss Yates's big fan has given her a gift of $50,000 for her new comic, was now a trending topic. After seeing the trends on Twitter, Cleo came downstairs to look for editor Perez.
Do you think that Magic Lamp has a dedicated fan like that?
She refreshed her homepage and saw the news. The Supreme-level cruise ship was the most expensive gift on the platform. It cost $5,000. Now, her notifications were filled with news of Celestial Wolf.
Sinclair West gave Celestial Wolf a Supreme-level cruise ship. Quickly come and take a look.
Higgins gave Celestial Wolf a Supreme-level cruise ship. Quickly come and take a look.
My niece's brain-dead fan gave Celestial Wolf a Supreme-level cruise ship. Quickly come and take a look.
Swordsman Zeke gave Celestial Wolf 10 Supreme-level cruise ships? Quickly come and take a look. Just as Cleo finished looking at them, her notifications were updated again. MC gave Celestial Wolf 10 Supreme-level cruise ships. Quickly come and take a look. Cleo was a little confused by the news. She looked at editor Perez and rephrased her sentence.
Your Magic Lamp is quite awesome. She has so many loyal fans after so many years.
As soon as she spoke, she received another notification.
Patrick is also selling clothes today and gave Celestial Wolf 10 Supreme-level cruise ships. Quickly come and take a look.
10 Supreme-level cruise ships at once? This momentum would definitely crush Miss Yates. Editor Perez was now extremely troubled by Magic Lamp. He switched his account and liked the gifts given to Celestial Wolf. He didn't mind them and answered Cleo perfunctorily. Cleo looked at his expression and sighed before changing the topic to something serious. Twitter is being overwhelmed with public opinion. Have you experienced such an event before? Editor Perez pursed his lips and made a voice call to Magic Lamp. Seeing the screen on his phone, Cleo stood by his side and waited as he made a call. Editor Perez? On the other end, Bessy's voice was calm as usual. Editor Perez took a deep breath and pretended to be relaxed.
Have you checked out your new comic? Many fans are giving you rewards.
Marvin had already shared this gossip with Bessy. Bessy touched her chin and said, Most of them are from my friends.
Anyway, they are fans who are supporting you.
Editor Perez smiled.
The response is very good. I'm hoping for the next volume soon.
After that, they chatted for a little bit before the call ended. As soon as the call ended, Editor Perez started to smile. He called her because he wanted to know how she was.
Was that Magic Lamp?
Cleo was shocked. Although she heard that Magic Lamp was a female, she didn't expect her to sound so young.
She seems to be in a good mood.
Has she checked Twitter? After recovering from her shock, Cleo shook her head and sighed. Now, I believe that she doesn't care about the performance of her new comic book. Editor Perez held his phone tightly and raised his head. Where's Mr. Higgins? Miss Yates wasn't giving in, and the results of Magic Lamp's performance weren't good. Editor Perez's heart sank. He was afraid that Magic Lamp would be ruined in his hands. The only way out was to look for Shane. Only Shane in the entire Pinnacle Studios was able to control what was happening now. Editor Perez was betting that Shane would help Magic Lamp. Just as I thought. Miss Yates is still trending. Magic Lamp's survival will depend on Mr. Higgins. I think that Mr. Higgins thinks highly of Magic Lamp. I will take you up first. Cleo took Editor Perez to look for Shane. In the office, Shane was on the phone with his father after reading Celestial Wolf. The Marshall family has never been clean. Shane stood by the window and lowered his eyes. They contacted the big figures in the capital. I'm still checking, and I will let you know once I find out more news. As for Film God, he's part of the Miller family. We can't talk to him for now. After speaking to his father, he finally told the person knocking on the door to come in. Shane was wearing a clean white shirt and black trousers as usual. He looked comfortable and elegant. Sit. He pointed at the sofa. Mr. Higgins. Editor Perez didn't sit immediately and lowered his head. It's about what's happening on the internet. Shane asked his secretary to bring in 3 cups of coffee. He took 1 sip of his coffee before looking at Editor Perez. On the internet? Yes, Magic Lamp is being suppressed online. Editor Perez mentioned Magic Lamp in a firm tone. Now, there's a group of people ridiculing her on the internet. Her opening was really shocking, and some netizens are trying to bring her down. If this continues, I'm afraid this will be the end. After reading the update, Shane had been busy with other things. The head of the corporation didn't have much time to follow the developments online. He only found out about it after Editor Perez and Cleo had told him about it. Editor Perez didn't mention Miss Yates. He knew that Miss Yates's identity wasn't simple, and he was afraid that if she was mentioned, Shane's impression of Magic Lamp would be ruined. He only talked about Magic Lamp's haters. 20 minutes later. I missed out on it. Leave the public opinion to me. Shane's expression was serious. You comfort Magic Lamp. After that, Shane got up and walked to his desk. He picked up the landline and called the public relations department. For a company as big as Pinnacle Studios, it was natural for it to have a public relations department. The public relations department accepted the task. Editor Perez let out a long sigh. Shane hung up his phone and was just about to open Twitter. The landline rang again. It was the public relations department. Mr. Higgins, do you really want us to manipulate the comments for Magic Lamp? Shane paused. He pressed the hands-free button. Is it difficult? Editor Perez felt even more nervous. No. On the other end, the public relations department paused before continuing. Did you not read the latest hot search on Twitter? He honestly didn't. The 3 people in the office were just discussing the next steps. After hearing what the public relations department said, they all subconsciously opened Twitter and looked at the hot search. In less than half an hour, the hot search topics on Twitter were all replaced. The group was shocked by the 1st to 4th hot topic. The 2nd volume of Celestial Wolf, Asimov's recommendation and praise. Film God's promotion. Netizens group together to send death threats. They clicked on the first hot search topic. It had 9,000 comments on Twitter. The 2nd part of Celestial Wolf was released. The content was praised by Asimov's science fiction magazine, the world's leading science fiction magazine.
Magic Lamp lived up to the expectations since her last appearance in the American science fiction world. Episode 579, Making Waves Across the Country. Asimov's Science Fiction was the world's largest leading science fiction magazine. There were more than a dozen comics that had been endorsed by them, and 19 comics of his were adapted into movies. 6 of them had a global box office of over $2.5 billion, and 3 had a global box office of over $5 billion. When science fiction was mentioned, the first person everyone thought of was Asimov. The magazine was a landmark figure in the comics industry. In the comics world, no one could question their authority. With their current status and the rising domestic comics industry, Asimov's approval was definitely worthy of being a hot search topic. It was well deserved. The hot search topic about the esteemed magazine became viral because of various marketing accounts. At this moment, even people who didn't read comics had an unspeakable sense of pride. As for the hot topic involving Film God, that didn't require an explanation. He dominated the country's entertainment industry, and no one expected that he would share Pinnacle Studios' post. Several hot topics in a row. Neither Asimov's magazine nor Film God approved of ordinary people. Editor Perez had not seen such a scene in the comics industry for years. At the start, when Don't Ask the Heavens, The Realm of the Gods was featured on the hot search topic, it only remained there for an hour and didn't dominate the list. As a result, when he saw the continuous hot search topics, Editor Perez couldn't believe his eyes. He exited Twitter and re-entered a few seconds later. The 4 hot search topics were still there, but the order had changed a little. Asimov's recommendation and praise was now the first hot search topic, followed by the second volume of Celestial Wolf and Film God's sharing of the post. All of them had the hot icon next to them. At the same time, the 6th most popular search, The Rise of National Comics, was on the rise. Compared to the other topics of interest, Film God's news paled a little in comparison. The hot search topics were so bewildering that the 3 of them were stunned for a few minutes. On the other end, the Public Relations Department paused for several seconds before carefully asking, "Mr. Higgins, if there aren't any further instructions, I will hang up." Pinnacle Studios was in the field of comics. This time, the comics industry took the world by storm, and he was definitely anxious to watch the developments. After hearing the voice, Shane finally came back to reality. He acknowledged the Public Relations Department and hung up the call. As soon as the call ended, Shane's landline rang again. This time, it was from the technical department. The reason was simple. The Pinnacle Studios app crashed because there were too many visitors. Pinnacle Studios was just a comic reading app, and daily maintenance was usually sufficient. It didn't require too many special technical requirements. No one thought that a comic app would become like Twitter and crash because of too many visitors. Just as Shane was busy with something, Editor Perez and Cleo were still stunned. The 2 of them went into the elevator in silence. Editor Perez reached out and pressed a floor button. Ding! When the elevator reached the floor, Cleo finally coughed. She looked at Editor Perez and slowly said, "Your magic lamp." Besides the trending topic of the rise of national comics, Magic Lamp accounted for 5 of the top searches and even managed to crash the Pinnacle Studios app. Cleo guessed that in less than 2 minutes, Pinnacle Studios crashes would become one of the trending searches. She was initially worried that Editor Perez and Magic Lamp would be defeated by Miss Yates. But now, it seemed that Magic Lamp had become an indispensable author to Pinnacle Studios. "I don't know either." Editor Perez's hands trembled. He took out his phone and sent a Twitter message to Magic Lamp. "Have you seen Twitter?" Magic Lamp replied with a question mark. Editor Perez opened Twitter and sent screenshots of Asimov's recommendation and the hot search bar to Magic Lamp. "How can you not know? 5 search topics, the top 5.
My God, only a few people have reached your level in the entertainment industry. Editor Perez was already shocked when Miss Yates appeared on the hot search bar, but Magic Lamp's appearance was beyond imagination in the comics industry. Today, this comic really sent waves in the country. Editor Perez finished typing his message and awaited Magic Lamp's shock. 2 seconds later, the other party replied. Editor Perez looked at it. Magic Lamp sent 2 messages. Oh, is that so? Let me finish playing a game first. Oh? How was this a normal person's reaction? She was also still in the mood to play a game? Wasn't she excited at all? Editor Perez was dumbfounded after he saw Magic Lamp's reply, but soon he was met with countless calls. The calls were all regarding Magic Lamp. On the internet, not only did fans of Celestial Wolf use the Pinnacle Studios app to read Magic Lamp's comic, even passerbys went to look at the comic dubbed The Nation's Comic. After reading it, they went back to Twitter to discuss it. As the traffic was overwhelming, many people saw whales spending money on Magic Lamp's fan page. Very soon, the powerful netizens discovered that the fan page was a little familiar, and started a thread in the comment section. Does anyone think that the first person listed is very familiar? Yes, me too. Bro, it seems like you're an old fan too. Give some directions to a newcomer. I was surprised after searching MC on Twitter. After searching, I saw a list of mutual fans and fell to my knees. Many people who saw this thread went to search for MC on Twitter. They clicked on his profile and looked at his mutual followers. President of the Soup Corporation, Professor of Medicine, Northwestern University, Noah, Film God, and Northwestern University's official forum. However, most people thought it was a coincidence. After all, the MC on Twitter was far from an ordinary person. No one thought that he was related to Magic Lamp. Someone also said quietly, "Doesn't that user Swordsman Zeke also seem familiar?" Of course he did. Zeke's fans shouted from the bottom of their hearts. This was his username. However, many people thought that it was just a fan of his. People started discussing him in another thread. In short, the mysterious fans became a small hot topic as well. On Miss Yates's side, after she saw the situation, she returned to the West family. Recently, the patriarch was in poor health, and everyone was waiting to see his will. She didn't continue paying attention to her new comic. She and her editor were very confident. The internet trends came and left in a whirlwind. Everyone in the company knew that Miss Yates's editor was at odds with editor Perez. After learning about what happened on Twitter, they didn't dare to mention it to the editor for fear of angering him. However, after such a huge uproar, Miss Yates's editor was also paying attention to her popularity on Twitter. When he sat down and looked at the hot searches again, he realized that those relating to Miss Yates were all gone. Film God? Asimov? The second part of Celestial Wolf? Miss Yates's manager felt a bad premonition. He sat up straight and clicked on them one by one. Immediately, he saw the headline news about Asimov and Film God. This wasn't the end. The traffic on Miss Yates's Twitter had also started to decrease. Many passerbys and fans of Miss Yates initially weren't interested in the second part of Celestial Wolf. Now that they were curious and read it, anyone with a discerning eye could tell that regardless of the character development, emotional expression, art style, and plot, Magic Lamp's comic was on another level compared to Miss Yates's. Even big shots in the comic industry commented, "Miss Yates's comic is still too childish and limiting. Not only is Magic Lamp's comic refreshing, but the second part is also far superior to the first part." These professional big shots carefully compared the two popular comic authors after seeing Asimov's praise. It was a very authoritative comparison. With this comparison, the new article titled, "Magic Lamp Dominates Miss Yates's Popularity," made the previous article, "Miss Yates is the True Trend of the Era," quite awkward.
Miss Yates's editor's face fell. No one dared to breathe deeply in the office. After a long while, he said with a sullen face,
"How did that damn Leonard Perez manage to play us with an underdog?"
He thought that Editor Perez was just acting when he came to visit him in the morning. After that, he sneered and made a call. He might not be able to touch Magic Lamp now because of her popularity, but that didn't mean he couldn't mess with Editor Perez. With his gold status in Pinnacle Studios and Miss Yates's weight, it wasn't difficult to deal with him. At this moment, Bessy was in her room editing her manuscript. Michael brought a gift box in and handed it to her. "Huh?" Bessy took the gift.
"A gift from Pete."
Michael looked at his phone. There were several messages in the group.
"At Michael Clark, quickly ask your wife to update soon."
Michael glanced at them and put his phone aside. Bessy remembered that this was a gift to Pete when he scored well in his final exams. After looking at it, she placed it aside. At this time, her phone lit up. She looked down and saw a message from Editor Perez.
"Editor Marshall wants to add you. I will be busy in the meantime, so you can look for him if there's anything at all."
At the same time, in a bar, Cleo looked at Editor Perez drinking silently and frowned.
"Aren't you going to tell Magic Lamp the truth?"
Editor Perez shook his head. In the dim light, he looked quite relieved.
"If Magic Lamp finds out that I was forced to give her up, what do you think she will do?"
Cleo was silent for a moment.
"Considering her temper, she will definitely not work with Editor Marshall. You know what sort of person Miss Yates is. She's now signed to Pinnacle Studios and is popular. If anything goes wrong, Magic Lamp might even be killed by the West family. Editor Marshall isn't simple as well. Editor Marshall has never liked me from the start. I shouldn't affect Magic Lamp's future. He has a lot of resources, so Magic Lamp will go further in his hands."
Episode 580. A Visit from the Director.
"Theo just wants you to hand Magic Lamp to him? What are you going to do?"
Cleo frowned. Leonard was in private contact with Magic Lamp. The only reason he had a good place in Pinnacle Studios was because of Magic Lamp. Leonard had a feud with Theo only because Theo was mean to a newcomer comic artist and hence signed this newbie under himself. This was the second author he'd ever signed besides Magic Lamp. He spent most of his time managing Pinnacle Studios' app. Although Magic Lamp's return was a hot topic, her credentials and popularity had not surpassed Portia's yet. Portia had a comic that was undergoing some copyright procedures.
"I'm fine with that. Everyone has their own path in life."
Leonard smiled.
"If not for her, I wouldn't be where I am today. You do know what sort of people are in Theo's department."
Cleo knew that Portia's identity wasn't a secret. As for Theo, Cleo signed and took a sip of his drink. He knew that there was no turning back for this. Bessy had no idea about the internal affairs of Pinnacle Studios. She was contacting Pete at the moment and talking to him about their meeting the next day. The results for the final exams came out on the 23rd. Mr. Rostron gave Bessy a call the moment the results were released and said that the difficulty level for this year had been record-breaking. Pete's results even became a hot search topic on the 23rd. But now that he was officially Mr. Rostron's student, the information had already been sealed. None of the media outlets dared to release his picture on Twitter. All that was known was that a person by the name of Pete had scored 739 marks. A score so high, some considered it hard to believe. Pete was currently at the West family's residence. Having packed his father's belongings, he spent the rest of the day in Devil City looking for the employee from back then. He'd gathered some useful information over the past 10 days or so. He thought about returning to his own rented unit as he had some translation to do and Mr. Rostron's materials to work on. Staying with the West family meant that he was under surveillance at all times, so he decided to rent a unit nearby. This way, it would be convenient for him to investigate as well. But Benson said that Edward's health wasn't in a good state tonight. Pete didn't have much attachment towards the West family, but like Bessy, he was soft-hearted. Edward was rather pitiful, considering that the entire West family was eyeing his assets. As such, Pete came anyway. When Bessy called, he was in Edward's bedroom. The family doctor hadn't arrived yet.
That cousin of yours?
Edward was especially weak. Seeing the gentle expression on Pete's face, Edward guessed that he'd been speaking to his cousin on the phone. Pete responded quietly after hanging up. Pete had always been a quiet person. Edward knew that. Edward said,
You wouldn't bring your cousin home to have dinner with us. Let me treat both of you to a meal outside. Is that all right?
He looked so expectant while his hands shook uncontrollably. Pete looked at him and wondered if he could even make it out of the house tomorrow. But he didn't agree right away. He simply said,
I'll ask her. Who's this big shot? Your grandfather is treating you to a meal and you have to ask?
Alec's voice could be heard. Before he could finish his sentence, Edward stopped him between coughs.
You! Shut up!
His entire face went red from coughing, and he panted for air. Alec said nothing more about Bessy.
Dad, don't get angry. Portia is already trying to contact Director Ross. She has a lot of contacts and will surely be able to get Director Ross over.
Pete furrowed his brows as he turned to look at Alec quietly. At this point, a housemaid came into the room with Portia and a doctor. Sir, Miss Portia has brought Director Ross here.
This is great, Dad. Portia brought Director Ross here. Let him have a look at you. Director Ross just came from the World Health Organization seminar.
Alec's eyes lit up as he exclaimed. Portia peered in from outside. She was standing beside an elderly man. A few other West family members were standing in the hallway, looking at Portia in agitation.
The World Health Organization?
Pete repeated it to himself. Alan eyed Pete mockingly. Benson realized that given Pete's place in society, he wouldn't know someone as important as the director in the World Health Organization. Hence, he explained,
Somewhere in Austria, the elites of the medical field come together as a part of the World Health Organization's seminar. Miss Portia is really impressive to have been able to get Director Ross to come.
Pete nodded. He recalled that Bessy had brought someone from the World Health Organization over too when Bertha was in critical condition. A lot was going on in the room now, so Pete excused himself and left. When he returned, he told Bessy that Edward hoped to give them a treat. Although Bessy said she wouldn't be bothered by Pete's matters, she actually investigated the West family rather thoroughly. She found that while Edward was a successful businessman, he had never given up on looking for Pete's family all these years. Michael even let her see the old man's will. Seeing what he'd written in his will, Bessy didn't have any adverse feelings towards him. In fact, she wanted to see just what he was like. Hence, upon hearing that Edward wanted to meet her, she agreed. When Bessy woke up the following morning, Michael was already back from his morning run and was showering. It was 77 degrees in the bedroom. She stood by the window and got the automatic curtains drawn with the remote control. It was already bright outside and she could feel the warmth.
What time is your meal appointment?
Michael came out of the shower in a white t-shirt and casual black pants. He hugged Bessy from behind and grabbed her hands. He kissed her tenderly first before resting his chin on her shoulder and looking at her. 12, Bessy replied. Her meal appointment with Pete was set at noon. Edward picked a famous restaurant in Devil City. Michael led the way, his fingers playing around with Bessy's. He squeezed each of his fingers through the gaps of hers until their 10 fingers were interlocked. He said,
You're not in a rush to draw your comic today, so make a trip down to the Marshall family with me. Or would you rather look for Noah first?
Let's go to the Marshall family first. Is Daniel coming back today? Bessy vaguely remembered Michael saying something like that when she was about to fall asleep the other night.
Probably this afternoon.
There was a lot to attend to in the laboratory recently, but Daniel still made time to return to Devil City. He had some stuff to retrieve from the base. And there were also the matters he had to see to in the hospital there. Bessy and Michael went to the Marshall family in the morning. The Marshall family's household was a historical site. And while most of their area had been renovated, the ancient style was kept. At about 11, Marvin came and asked for her.
"Drive carefully. Don't go too fast,"
Michael reminded him. Marvin had heard this from Rosemary, Patrick, Christopher, Zeke, and the rest for the past half a month now. He was no longer surprised to hear this reminder and hence simply nodded.
"Don't worry, Michael."
As they left, Master Lou looked thoughtfully at Bessy's back view.
"Michael and Bessy are so loving."
He was discussing such a vast business with Michael, and Michael didn't hide anything from Bessy at all. Pete reached the West family's household at 10. Edward seemed to be in a better state than the day before. He even wore a festive outfit. Alec was holding some documents and talking to the secretary when he saw his father.
"Dad, you look much better today. Director Ross is really capable. You're going out today?" "Isn't Pete meeting his cousin for lunch?"
Edward did look more energetic today. He knew that Pete was close to his cousin. If he managed to win her over, he would win Pete over too.
"Alec, if you and Portia are free at noon, you can join us."
Portia was the star of the West family now. Edward had heard from the housemaid that Portia was very popular online. With her around, it might be easier for the youngsters to talk.
"Dad, what are you saying? Portia is so busy, and she has to meet Shane to discuss a draft today. In 2 days, she'll be going to Evanston to visit the film set of Film God. She doesn't have the time."
Alec smiled.
"That's true."
Edward nodded. He turned to Pete and said,
"Let's go."
Pete's expression hadn't changed this whole time. He quietly left with his grandfather. Alec burst into laughter as he watched the two men leave.
"I wonder what he is thinking,"
said his assistant beside him. Alec mockingly remarked,
"He's an old man now."
Was Pete even fit to have Portia accompany him for a meal? Episode 581. Dinner and a Gift. At the restaurant, Bessy arrived a little earlier today. Michael was afraid that Marvin would speed, so he accommodated for some buffer time. Bessy entered the reserved private room at about 11. The private room was spacious and furnished in an old style. The lights were dim, and it was quiet, almost like an abandoned train station from the past. 4 waiters were inside, and they began serving food the moment Marvin and Bessy entered. Marvin took the dishes from the waiters and waved them away.
"You're not needed here anymore."
It was a high-class restaurant, and customers typically paid a lot for the food and service, so it was rare to see customers who didn't prefer to be waited on. But, seeing that Marvin seemed rather familiar with it, they did not say much. They simply left quietly. Bessy sat on the stool by the window and placed Michael's gift for Pete on the table. She then checked her Twitter. Michael and Bessy each prepared a gift for Pete. She opened Jared's chat and sent a message. "Do you know?" Jared did not reply. Instead, he called her. "Jared." Bessy took her earphones out and put them on.
"This force hasn't made an appearance in years."
Jared sounded pretty leisurely on his end. He was sitting in Kenneth's villa and even had his butler serve him tea.
"They're not at their peak now. You know that the larger transactions and interactions in the global arena have been between Giant Crocodile's family and Patrick."
Jared took a sip of tea and thanked the butler before continuing.
"The transactions in recent years have been in the underground auction area and mostly involve defense weaponry. Among the few transactions I've found, I think you'd know 2 of them."
"I do. The airfield and Daniel's base," Bessy said. Jared smiled.
"That's right. The power you've been investigating isn't in the best shape now. They don't have that many people left in the group. But all we know now is that there's an important item being auctioned next month in Evanston. You can ask Patrick more about it."
The underground auction area in Evanston was Patrick's. Bessy tapped her fingers on the table. "I got it."
"Kenneth's gone to Devil City, too."
Jared reminded her. Bessy remembered Michael mentioning this. They ended the call. Bessy was going to have a look at her game when she received a few messages on Twitter. They were from Theo.
Magic Lamp, what's the estimated date of your next release? It can be out by the 10th of next month, right? It'd be best before that.
Leonard had always been the one in charge of the comics. Bessy frowned as she read Theo's reply again. She already found it strange when Leonard got her to add him on Twitter last night. The footsteps sounded outside the private room, signaling that a guest was here. It should be Pete and Edward. Bessy hurriedly replied, "Won't be in time," to Theo, and then closed the app. She placed her cell phone on the table and looked up. Marvin went to get the door. Edward, Pete, and Benson entered. Edward caught sight of Marvin first. Marvin's expression was rather cold, and one might think he looked fierce at first glance. Although he wasn't a black belt holder, his martial arts skills weren't to be underestimated. His aura said just as much. Edward was a little taken aback when he saw Marvin. He hadn't expected Pete's cousin to have such a person around her. When Edward discovered that Pete had other relatives, he hadn't actually paid much attention to them. All that mattered to him was Pete. And he knew enough about Pete. He knew Pete had surely inherited his father's intelligence. When he first received information about Pete, he had already taken interest in him. But when Pete arrived in Devil City, Edward found out that he was even more outstanding than what he'd seen in the documents. He was just a little solitary as a person. Hence, when Edward found out that Pete was especially nice and close to his cousin, he felt that he had to meet this girl. Edward had already asked Benson about Bessy before he came today. Benson simply said that Bessy was a little unusual. However, he didn't elaborate on what he meant by that. But as he saw Marvin and then Bessy in the private room, Edward had some idea what Benson meant by unusual. Bessy's charisma was already out of the ordinary. "Mr. West." Bessy got up and greeted Edward the moment she saw him. She seemed and sounded respectful. Pete's expression softened the moment he saw Bessy. "You're here so early?" He had thought that Bessy would arrive on the dot as usual. "This place was on the way," Bessy said casually. Having greeted Edward, Bessy handed Pete's gift. The packaging was rather simple. "What's this?" Pete was shocked to receive it. Standing beside Bessy, Marvin replied on her behalf. "Michael's gift for you, for doing well on your final exams." "Michael?" Pete seemed surprised. Edward, who had just taken his seat, had no idea what was going on. He was confused by what Marvin had just said.
"A gift for completing his final exams?" "Yup."
Marvin didn't feel too pressurized, since this was Pete's grandfather that he was talking to. He wasn't as uncomfortable as when he was in front of Jared.
"Pete is the top scholar in the nation." "Top scholar in the nation?"
Edward turned to Pete.
Didn't you say you didn't do well?"
Edward knew that Pete had taken his final exams. He also knew that Pete's grades had always been good. On the 23rd, he even made it a point to ask Pete about his grades. But Pete had simply shrugged and said he hadn't done well. He sounded so serious that Edward thought it was the truth. He dared not even breathe a word about the final exams over the next few days. How was this? Not doing well? "I really didn't do well." Pete's expression was cold again, and he sounded dead serious. Benson asked, "I'm sorry to ask, but, Pete, what's your score?" Any student who had taken the final exams this year would have known that this guy scored a top score of 739. But Edward and Benson hadn't paid attention to the top scholar for the year. 739. Pete furrowed his brows a little. The test questions this year were harder, and the papers. He'd sent the questions over to Luke. Luke had told him that besides a deduction of a couple marks in the language paper, Bessy could score full marks in all the other papers. When he was doing the paper, Pete had already guessed that he'd be scoring about 740 marks in all. But Luke told him not to think too much, nor to compare himself with a genius like Bessy. But Pete still felt that he hadn't done well enough. Bessy had several other matters to attend to while she was studying. As for him, the only thing he did besides his schoolwork was the translation, and the translation questions were picked by Luke to boost his foreign language skills. Pete spoke the truth. At this point, Benson was glancing at him expressionlessly. That glance seemed to say, "I can't believe I trusted you." Edward was shocked throughout the meal. "Hurry up, open it up and see what Michael got you." Having hung around with Bessy and Michael, he was no longer shocked by the strangest of things people would say. He ignored Pete's previous response and was curious to find out what was in the box. Michael was a member of Pete's family now. Marvin felt that this gift must mean something. Pete turned to look at Bessy. He thought about the gift that Michael had given him at their wedding and didn't quite feel like opening the gift in front of the West family members. "Take a look," Bessy said easily. She didn't see what Michael had gotten for Pete, but she guessed it would probably be a diamond or something along those lines. She wasn't so interested in that. Pete began unwrapping it slowly. Marvin moved closer to him. The box was light. When he opened it, he saw a layer of cushion and a black remote key lying on it. Bam! Pete looked at it and immediately closed the box. Benson had a look of disbelief on his face. "This is..." Episode 582. A prominent figure above the Marshall family. The black item resembled the key of a certain luxury car, but there was no symbol on it. "It's nothing," Pete said calmly. Benson hesitated. He thought that the car key looked like it was for a Rolls-Royce Phantom. They were a limited edition, and the Higgins family had one. In the entire city, only Shane had one as well. The reason Benson was aware of this key was that Portia had been in Shane's car before. However, there were only 50 cars of this model worldwide, and there were less than 10 in the country. Even if the West family had money, they probably wouldn't be able to get it. He was probably wrong. Seeing that Benson wasn't paying attention anymore, Pete frowned a little. He didn't know what it was, but just from Marvin's jealous expression, he guessed that it wasn't simple and was prepared to look into it later. If it was too expensive, he would definitely return it to Michael because he was rich. Thinking of this, Pete had a headache. Compared to an affluent couple, a poor person like him really couldn't understand what Michael was thinking. The group didn't talk much. Besides Edward, Bessy and Pete didn't have much to say and were quite cold. When he was about to leave after dinner, Edward told Benson to give a present to Bessy. "This is..." Bessy looked at the gift in Benson's hands and frowned slightly.
"I heard Pete say that you took care of his entire family."
Edward sighed and personally handed the gift to her.
"It isn't much, so I hope you can accept it."
His eyes were sincere, and he coughed several times when he spoke, appearing weak. Bessy was forced to accept it. "Thank you." Seeing that she had accepted it, Edward felt relieved. When the group went downstairs, he invited Bessy to the West family's house. However, Bessy had to wait for Michael to come over to look for Daniel, so she rejected him. They separated at the hotel entrance. Pete left with Edward and the others. Bessy and Marvin waited at the hotel entrance. Bessy glanced at Edward's back view and couldn't help but touch her chin. What gift should I give him in return? Without thinking, Marvin suggested, "Diamonds or a rare artifact?" Bessy was speechless. She withdrew her gaze and leaned against the pillar, ignoring his suggestion. She thought about the first time the West family came to look for Pete. It seemed that it was because Edward was in poor health. Daniel's laboratory had a lot of medicine, and she wondered if they could be used. However, she didn't know anything about Edward's illness. Thinking about it, she sent a Twitter message to Pete. At the same time, Michael had finished settling business with the head of the Marshall family.
Michael, I entrust you with the goods,
Mr. Marshall said as he handed a cigarette to Michael. Michael glanced at it and avoided it. The head of the Marshall family was shocked. He heard that Michael smoked. Otherwise, he wouldn't have offered him a cigarette. Michael shook his head and smiled.
My wife has a nose like a dog.
When he mentioned this, his eyes seemed to light up, and he seemed amused. After that, Michael bid Mr. Marshall farewell and left. He had made an appointment with Bessy to visit Daniel's mountain villa. It happened that Noah had just ended filming and was staying there. Mr. Marshall personally sent Michael off. Standing at the door, he finally understood what Michael's words meant. He couldn't help but smile, but he was surprised at the same time. Next to him, Julius was also surprised.
This young man isn't the same as the rumors. I'm even more curious about Bessy, the head of the Physics Research Institute. How interesting.
Mr. Marshall smiled lightly. He knew that Michael's identity wasn't simple, nor was Marvin's. However, Marvin was very respectful to Bessy. Mr. Marshall didn't think that the head of the Physics Research Institute and the Miller family could carry much weight on Marvin. Just as he was deep in thought, a middle-aged man came over and said respectfully,
Sir, your brother wants to see you. He wants to see me?
Mr. Marshall glanced at Julius with a cigarette in his mouth. The Marshall family wasn't clean. Mr. Marshall had stepped on and killed many people to rise to his position. His methods were vicious. His younger brother was half his brother and his father's illegitimate son. He led a hedonistic lifestyle, but was smart enough to know who not to provoke. That was why Mr. Marshall spared his life.
He seems to be short on money, but he did do a good job in the Higgins family's company recently. Shane learned that he's from the Marshall family and gave him a special treatment.
Julius said,
Many noble guests have arrived in Devil City recently. He should get his act together.
Mr. Marshall held his cigarette and lowered his eyebrows. He spoke solemnly, as if he was talking about a dead person.
If he offends an important person because of his idiotic ways, he will meet his end soon.
After that, he went directly to his study.
Heard that?
Julius looked at the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man nodded respectfully.
I will warn him.
He paused and then continued.
Mr. Marshall, the important person you're referring to. You should know who Mr. Marshall has been seeing recently.
Julius put his hands behind his back.
Even if he doesn't dare to offend those people, your brother should be more careful.
Julius didn't know the full story, but he was clear that besides Michael, there were still several people with complicated identities. The middle-aged man nodded seriously and left to report this matter to Mr. Marshall's brother. On the other side, Pete sent Edward back to the West family house. Portia, who was rarely at the West family's house, saw Edward and immediately stood up. She was initially on the phone with someone. Edward held Portia in high regard. When he saw that she was back, he stayed in the living hall to talk to her. Grandpa, Dr. Ross will be busy at the hospital tomorrow morning. A very important figure is coming for a meeting, and I can only take you for a checkup at night, Portia said. It's difficult to contact Dr. Ross. Portia looked at him and sighed. Portia and Pete were the two grandchildren he was most satisfied with. He didn't expect Portia to be so outstanding. In the hallway, the others also looked at her and nodded.
I heard that Dr. Ross only gives face to the Marshall family. Miss Portia is awesome. Pete received top scores in the final exams. This child scored 739 marks, but still said he didn't do well.
Edward sighed and thought of Pete while complimenting him generously.
I only learned about it when his cousin told me.
Hearing his words, many people looked at Pete in surprise. Being the top scorer in the exams wasn't an easy feat.
Pete, will you be studying at Northwestern University or the University of Chicago?
A senior in the West family looked at Pete and asked in shock.
The top student in the exams should be able to join the 4 major research labs. The 4 major research labs are physics, mathematics, computer science, and medicine. These are powerful places,
Benson explained to Pete as he was afraid that he didn't understand them.
Pete, you're the top student. As long as you do your best, you will definitely excel.
Pete nodded.
I see.
He really wasn't aware of the 4 major labs. When he contacted Luke and his group, they only mentioned the 4 major research institutes. These 4 major research institutes turned out to be mathematics, physics, computer science, and medicine. After talking about Evanston and the 4 major families in the capital, the others didn't treat Pete as coldly as before. They were even friendlier, and this caused Portia to frown. In the past, only Portia, the youngest child, stood out. Now, these people were surrounding Pete, and Portia was a little upset. She looked at Pete with some ridicule in her eyes. However, she didn't say anything back. Edward glanced at Portia and gently said,
Portia, didn't you say that you have something very important to tell everyone? Something very important?
Something Portia said was important was definitely not simple. Edward looked at Portia seriously. He recalled the case reported by his subordinates recently and went to the main point.
Has something happened in Devil City?
Portia retracted her gaze and faintly said to the people in the hall, A group of people has arrived in Devil City, and even the Marshall family is afraid of them. After hearing her words, the West family members looked at one another. There were 2 large families in Devil City. One of them was the Marshall family. They dealt in legal and illegal businesses. The other was the Higgins family. The Marshall family was more powerful than the Higgins family. The West family was inferior and wasn't worth mentioning. Portia's position in the West family was high because of her relations with the Higgins family. The weight of these 2 big families in Devil City was clear. But there was someone the Marshall family didn't dare to offend. Who exactly were these people? Episode 583. Experimental Medicine from the World Health Organization.
No wonder the Marshall family hasn't competed with the Higgins family over the piece of land in the West recently. The head of the Marshall family also hasn't appeared much recently.
The West Corporation's project director breathed a sigh of relief.
So this is the reason. It's all thanks to Miss Portia that we found out. Otherwise, we would all be in the dark.
The West family initially wanted to fight for the investment, but now it seemed that the Marshall and Higgins families gave up for other reasons. Everyone in the hall discussed the matter in horror. Only Pete's expression was as cold as before. He bid farewell to Edward and left the West family. He checked the gift Michael sent him on his phone while walking. He didn't find anything. He thought about it and asked Marvin. Within a few seconds, Marvin sent him a picture of a luxury sports car and a price tag. Pete thought about it and felt that if he really drove this car, it would be like traveling around with gold. He asked Marvin where they were now, planning to return the car to Michael. He looked at his phone as he went out. The West family was now in a state of shock, and only Pete seemed relaxed. The project director glanced at Pete's back view and couldn't help but shake his head. However, he didn't find it surprising. He guessed that he had just returned and had never heard of the Marshall and Higgins families before.
Pete, where are you going?
Benson followed him.
I'm going to look for my cousin and her husband.
Marvin had already sent him their address, and Pete remembered it at a glance. He was about to drive out. Benson said,
Let me ask the chauffeur to send you there.
No need. Pete immediately rejected him. Since Pete arrived at the West family's house, he was very distant from the West family members. He rarely sat in the West family's car, but now Benson fully understood his personality. In the end, Pete was convinced by Benson. After getting in the car, he reported the address. The chauffeur was a native of the city. When he heard the address, he looked in the rearview mirror in surprise. The address Pete gave him was a huge manor in Devil City. There was only one word to describe it: expensive. However, the chauffeur acted professionally and didn't ask him further questions. He only became more curious about Pete. Daniel's home. When Bessy and Michael arrived, Daniel had just come back.
Brother, Bessy.
Daniel took a sip of the ice water, snapped his fingers, and asked the attendant to bring water for the two of them.
You came just in time.
The 3 glasses were filled with ice water. Michael took 2 cups, poured one away, and replaced it with milk for Bessy. Seeing his actions, Daniel couldn't help but rub his nose.
I was negligent. Brother, this is the sample I brought over.
After Daniel rested, he went to the laboratory upstairs to show Michael the experimental product he had brought back.
Tomorrow I will go to the city hospital. Brother, please look at this and tell me if there are any problems. The old man can't spot any himself.
Daniel had his own expertise. He specialized in a different field from Michael's. There were some things that Michael was good at, which he didn't understand. The group went to the library upstairs after taking a break. Marvin sat downstairs and played with Daniel's computer as he waited for Pete to arrive. Upstairs, when Michael was busy with something, Daniel found a radiation-proof coat for Bessy to wear. She didn't accept it.
Look at the fabric of my clothes.
Bessy showed him her sleeves casually. Daniel didn't pay attention to Bessy's clothes. Once he was reminded by her, he leaned over to take a look. After seeing them clearly, he was amazed and said,
Awesome.
It's not bad. Bessy crossed her arms and watched Michael. Suddenly, she remembered something.
Do you have any experimental drugs here? What type?
Daniel was looking at Michael in awe. He was quite wealthy now. Bessy thought about it and described it based on what Pete said. Daniel was a genius. After hearing a few specific terms, he seemed to understand.
Cell aging. It exists. Wait for a moment.
He went to search the cupboard on the left. A few bottles clanged and, after a long while, he found a medicine bottle.
It won't be cured, but this tablet can delay aging if the person takes 1 tablet 2 times a day. The old man only had 2 bottles and I brought a bottle over.
Daniel originally wanted to study it. However, it was a pity that he wasn't as sharp as the old man in this aspect and couldn't discover anything. As a result, it was just left here for nearly a year. When Pete arrived, it was already night. Daniel knew that Pete was Bessy's cousin and warmly invited him to stay the night. During dinner, Bessy gave the medicine bottle to Pete. She propped up her leg and casually said, "A gift for Edward. He should take it twice a day. It will strengthen his body." Pete looked at the drug and guessed that it was related to Daniel. He glanced at Bessy, and just as he was about to speak, Daniel finished his dinner and interrupted him.
"Child, just take it. It isn't much. It has been here for about a year. Who is this Edward, though? According to blood relations, he's my grandpa,"
Pete said. Daniel asked a few more questions. Bessy didn't eat much today. She raised her eyebrow and glanced at Pete, saying, "Take it." Pete put the medicine bottle in his pocket. Pete didn't bother to hear any more, as he was afraid of annoying her. Bessy was in a special situation and Pete didn't want to make her unhappy. Tonight, not only did he return the car keys that Michael gave him, but he also received anti-aging medicine from Bessy. Marvin watched Pete and shook his head.
"He's still young."
Pete was speechless. Only then did Bessy lean back on her chair and start playing with her phone. Her eyebrows were delicate, but she didn't look easy to mess with. She received a message from Theo.
"Send me a high-resolution picture of yourself and I will help you with your promotions next month."
Bessy only replied, "I don't have any." After that, she clicked on Leonard's profile and asked, "Are you okay?" Leonard spoke to her and smiled as usual. Thinking about it, Bessy clicked on Don't Ask the Heavens profile and asked about it. On the other end, Don't Ask the Heavens realized that Magic Lamp had contacted him first. As he had been looking for an excuse to talk to her, Don't Ask the Heavens was a little surprised. He naturally knew that Magic Lamp was cold. She was only in contact with Leonard the entire time. It wasn't a secret that Shane was Don't Ask the Heavens. Bessy asked him about Leonard politely. Hearing her, Shane was a little surprised. He paused for a moment before replying, "I will help you find out." The next day, in the morning, Pete was busy investigating something in Devil City. He only found the time to pass the bottle of medicine to Edward. Daniel found a white plastic bag for him in his home. Pete placed the medicine bottle in it. When he arrived at the West family's house, the West family had already prepared a car to take Edward to the hospital.
"Pete?"
Benson was the first to notice Pete and asked in surprise,
"Why are you here?" "My cousin has something to give you."
Pete handed the simple plastic bag to Edward and explained,
"She said it was a favor in return."
A gift in a plastic bag. Alec couldn't help but sneer. His assistant also couldn't help but shake his head. However, Edward didn't look down on it. He had received many gifts in his lifetime and appreciated her efforts. He was even a little surprised. Did that mean that Pete's cousin recognized him?
"I like it very much."
He looked at Pete. It was obvious that he was happy, despite having a serious expression. Pete was also relieved.
"What's this?"
Benson looked at the plastic bag and felt that Pete's cousin was too casual. Pete hesitated before saying, "Health supplements." Benson was speechless. Pete left quickly, but Benson and Alec accompanied Edward to the hospital. Dr. Ross was currently free. He gave Edward an initial examination. The equipment he brought back from the seminar was precious. After the examination, Benson carried the white plastic bag casually. He could already tell that it was a bottle of medicine and wasn't too curious about it. On the contrary, Alec was speechless when he saw that Benson was still holding on to the cheap plastic bag. After Edward did his final examination, he turned pale and almost fell. Benson hurriedly went up to support him, and chaos ensued in the examination room. In a panic, Benson dropped the bag, causing the white medicine bottle to roll out. Dr. Ross was just about to bring the printed results over. When he turned around, he accidentally saw the white medicine bottle and glanced at it. 10 seconds later, he remembered something. He turned his head back stiffly and picked up the medicine bottle that was almost stepped on by the nurse. After confirming the writing on it, he paused for a moment and said sternly,
"Mr. West, where did you get this medicine?" "His grandson's cousin gave it to him."
Benson paused and said quietly,
"He said it contains health supplements and was collecting dust at his cousin's house."
Alec also came back to reality. He didn't notice Dr. Ross's expression and only frowned.
"Who told you to present these rubbish items in front of Dr. Ross?"
Before he could say anything, Dr. Ross suddenly spoke.
"Experimental drugs from the laboratory of the World Health Organization were collecting dust?"
He looked at the white bottle carefully and saw that some dust could be seen on it. Episode 584. Kenneth and Bessy get to business.
"You mean this is the World Health Organization's medicine?"
Benson quickly reacted and looked at Director Ross in shock. 2 days ago, Director Ross had said that Edward's illness couldn't be cured and could only be suppressed. However, most of the medicines needed were experimental medicines. He didn't have much time left. Edward only had a few months left, so he must find a way to extend his life for as long as possible. Now, only 2 families in Evanston had associations with Austria in America. As for Devil City, even the Marshall family didn't have a way out, let alone their West family. Director Ross's family wasn't prominent in Devil City, but his medical skills were superb and famous, so the Marshall family treated him very politely. He was limited to a certain number of consultations every day, but even so, Edward had been scheduled 3 months later. The fact that Portia had made Director Ross allow for an exception of Edward's checkup ahead of time was one of the reasons why the West family was so surprised. But now, the experimental drug that even Director Ross could hardly obtain was the health supplements in Pete's hands?
"Yes, I recognize this sign. Edward, can you give me a pill for our hospital to study?"
Director Ross looked at Edward. In recent years, 2 domestic geniuses from the organization had gradually advanced the domestic medicine field. Director Ross was getting older and, though his medicine skills had reached a high level nationally, he still couldn't meet the standards of professors in the World Health Organization, nor could he enter the organization as a student. This time, it was only thanks to those 2 people that he exchanged and studied at the organization for half a month. In the past half a month, he had gained a wide range of knowledge. The World Health Organization had classifications, and he naturally knew that several top old professors in the laboratory would study various experimental drugs. Some of these laboratories wouldn't be officially invested in hospitals because of the high development price. When Director Ross visited the first laboratory, the guiding student had introduced this experimental drug, but it had been locked away and Director Ross could only take a look at it. Although he didn't touch those experimental drugs, he still remembered the signs of such experimental drugs in the organization. It was the same as this bottle. Edward suppressed his shock and said, as always,
"Of course."
It was just that his voice was slightly stiff.
"Thank you."
Director Ross had always acted normally towards the West family, and his attitude towards them did not differ from other people. He was very enthusiastic at this moment and even asked the head nurse to bring a business card to Edward.
"Edward, this is my personal number. If you have any questions in the future, feel free to contact me."
Then, the director of the hospital's pharmaceutical department came to get the medicine.
"It turned out to be the experimental drug of the World Health Organization's first laboratory. Isn't this the laboratory that Mr. Brown was in before?"
The director and several major physicians all approached Dr. Ross. The group of people discussed heatedly. Having been excluded, the West family members exchanged glances. Especially Benson and Edward. When Pete had come in with a plastic bag previously, Benson thought that the bottle of medicine was a normal health supplement and hadn't cared too much about it. Compared with this medicine, Edward was more concerned about Pete's cousin accepting his gift. She had even returned the gift, indicating the change of outlook on him. Who knew that now, they could feel the change in Director Ross and the others' attitudes towards Edward. In the end, Director Ross personally sent Edward out. The West family felt a little flattered to be sent out by the highly respected Dr. Ross himself.
"Mr. West, you should know that we had a meeting this morning. It was a special speech by Mr. Brown. He has been in Devil City recently."
Director Ross had forgotten about this matter because of the experimental drug. He thought about it and said,
"If possible." "No, forget it."
"Mr. Brown?"
Edward glanced at him. Director Ross explained,
"Mr. Brown is a student of the dean of the organization, who has 2 students. He's second to none in cell virology."
After sending off Edward, the director of the pharmaceutical department spoke with obvious surprise.
"The West family can actually obtain the experimental drug from the laboratory? I heard that these drugs are extremely popular with several forces in Austria and are very limited in quantity. With the experimental drug in their hands, if they can invite Mr. Brown as well, then Edward's illness might not be hopeless after all."
Director Ross shook his head. Mr. Brown had been concentrating on specific research these days and had just developed a living enzyme. Hence, he had been cooped up in the laboratory and mostly only received intractable disease discussion groups from several domestic hospitals. It was too difficult to invite him. This was also why he hadn't continued asking Edward just now. The director of the pharmaceutical department also thought so casually. Sitting in the car, the West family still felt like they were dreaming. Having met Bessy and Marvin, Benson already felt like these were still acceptable, but the most unacceptable thing was Alec. In his eyes, Pete was an ordinary person with no fighting capacity, so Alec hadn't cared much that such a person had robbed him of his inheritance and returned home. But now, Benson and Edward were both speechless. Everyone sat quietly in the car. At 8 p.m., Pete came to the West family's house to discuss the memorial ceremony of Alan's death. This was the first time Pete was present, and Edward wanted to continue discussing with him. As soon as Pete entered, He could feel most of the West family staring at him. A white medicine bottle was solemnly placed on the table.
Pete, your cousin's drug.
Edward glanced at him. Looking at their expressions, Pete figured out that both Bessy and Daniel were playing tricks. So he said slowly with a casual expression, "It's the health supplement that my cousin gave me. I don't know where she bought it from either." Pete skillfully deflected the problem and didn't say much else about Bessy and Daniel. Alex slightly heaved a sigh of relief upon hearing this. It should have been a mistake, or Pete wouldn't be taking it so lightly. Now that Edward was about to make a will, if Pete really had any abilities, he wouldn't remain silent and not seek benefits for himself. But even so, some members of the West family had already been shaken, and their views of Pete had changed for the better. This could be seen from Pete's seating. While sitting quietly and eating dinner, Pete's phone rang. He looked down at it and saw that it was Andrea. Everyone at the table was watching his movements, and it would be too deliberate to pick up the phone outside. He picked up directly without going out. "Mom, have you checked it?" On the other end of the phone, Andrea was silent for a while before asking,
"Yes, we'll go to the cemetery tomorrow. Come and join us."
Pete pursed his lips and put down his fork, his eyelashes drooping. Pete had always known what was gnawing at Andrea's heart. When she had dropped out of high school to work, he had discovered her chemistry doctorate diploma in his grandma's belongings. Compared to Evanston, she was even more resistant to Devil City. After a long while, Andrea said, "I'll think about it. Take care of yourself." Pete calmly hung up. Everyone at the table, including Edward, heard him calling Mom. Edward ate a piece of vegetable and pondered for a moment before asking,
Your mom is coming to see Alan tomorrow?
Pete nodded slightly. He understood Andrea well and knew that she would definitely come.
Benson, go and buy a ticket for Miss Wilson.
Edward nodded without asking much else. It was the summer vacation and lots of people came to the popular tourist spots in Devil City on vacation. At this time, it was almost impossible to book a ticket to Devil City. Tickets could only be booked 3 days later.
You should have told your mom earlier. It's more troublesome now.
After dinner, Edward glanced at Pete.
I'll see if there's anyone in Evanston.
Andrea wouldn't make it in time. After talking about the memorial service, Pete got up and bid farewell to Edward. I won't trouble you with the ticket. Marvin had said he had a way.
There's also the upcoming summit, so several trains have been suspended and non-local trains were also restricted. Tell your mom not to worry. It's fine if she comes 2 days later.
Edward said. The Devil City summit had come too suddenly, and Portia had said a few days ago that Devil City was now tightly controlled in all aspects of travel. They could never buy a ticket at the last minute. Pete nodded and said nothing. On the other side, Marvin had already told Michael about the ticket. After putting the test tube in and seriously wiping his hands with disinfectant, Michael asked, And Andrea is coming? Let Patrick arrange her travel. Nodding, Marvin took out his cell phone and informed Pete about the arrangement. This wasn't considered a big deal at all, since it was regarding Andrea. Even if Michael hadn't given consent, Patrick would still have made the arrangements. Marvin had only come to inform Michael that Andrea was coming to Devil City. Bessy's aunt coming to Devil City was no small matter, and the summit was coming as well, so Marvin naturally had to be careful. If Bessy had nothing else to do tomorrow, he would prepare to pick Andrea up himself. If she was busy, he would let the Marshall family pick her up. The flight is at 7 a.m. tomorrow, and she'll arrive at the airport at about 9 a.m. I'll arrange for someone to pick her up. After receiving the ticket information, Marvin forwarded it to Pete and then talked business to Michael. Michael, you'll be meeting a few people from several countries tomorrow. The summit will keep you busy for now, but at the same time, the Marshall family still contacts Kenneth. Michael had come to Devil City this time not just to accompany Bessy, but also to revive Devil City's economic lifeline. Patrick had chosen the Marshall family. Tapping his fingers on the table absent-mindedly, Michael thought for a while and said, Follow Miss Miller to the Marshall family's house tomorrow. In the whole of Devil City, apart from Michael, only Bessy could control Kenneth. Marvin also knew that. However, would the Marshall family believe Miss Miller? Episode 585, Negotiations with Big Figures. Also, Marvin looked at Michael.
Miss Miller and Mr. White.
When he was drinking with Giant Crocodile, he had heard that Bessy and Kenneth had a rivalry between them. These days, Bessy had been doing research and drawing in peace, and Michael wouldn't let her touch anything violent. If she had to go, negotiate with Kenneth now. With her originally fiery temper and particularly bad mood these days, Marvin was afraid that if the negotiation with Kenneth fell through, Bessy would directly call Matthew over and catch Kenneth on the spot. It might be better to find James instead. At least he and Kenneth were close, and he could negotiate with him. As for Bessy, she only knew how to make big actions.
It's no problem,
Michael said calmly. He reached out to take off his lab coat and went out to look for Bessy. Behind him, Marvin stared at his back silently for a long time. Bessy was having a video call with Emmanuel in her room at the moment.
The model is ready, and several companies are trying it out. You can take a look at it if you're free. I heard from your dad that you want to introduce portable 4D figures into the comics industry.
Emmanuel poured a glass of water at his desk. His whole body was projected into the room in 4 dimensions. While sitting in front of the computer, Bessy drew calmly and replied to him. This is Devil City's Pinnacle Studios. We'll start with a trial, then it'll be the information age. The game warehouse might come out within 20 years, and people can enjoy completing various studios in the virtual space. Comics had to be included as well. This was Bessy, after all.
Okay, it's yours anyway, so it's up to you. Your dad has asked the planning department to contact Pinnacle Studios. The Miller family has sent someone there to conduct a field trip as well, and the agreement has been signed.
Putting down his cup, Emmanuel looked up to see Michael coming in. He left work and talked to Michael about Bessy's recent situation. The 2 big bosses drank coffee and sat together, facing the virtual projection. Michael even showed Emmanuel the barely visible 4-dimensional color photos. Bessy silently glanced at them, put down her pen and picked up her phone to look at Twitter. Pinnacle Studios' high-level executive had very high work efficiency. Editors Theo and Leonard had rather simple affairs. She had been assigned to Theo's group. So, Leonard had lied to her? Frowning slightly, Bessy put down her phone and pondered slightly. She didn't know Theo, but she had indeed signed at Pinnacle Studios under Leonard. She was just thinking about it when Leonard sent her a message. Leonard said,
A major event is underway within the group. I heard that there's an internal test quota for a comic. Have you told Theo?
Bessy knew that Leonard was talking about the machine used by the Miller family. She didn't care much about this and casually said, yes. Then, she typed another message asking about him. Leonard said,
I'm very busy these days and I can't bring you along with me. Look out for yourself with Theo. You should ask more about the recommendation and internal test quota. By the way, did Theo ask you for the high-definition promotional photos?
Magic Lamp said, I didn't give it to him. On the other end of the phone, Leonard was in a dilemma. Pinnacle Studios kept the author's signing information confidential and without the editing of the contract. The copy of the ID would naturally not be taken out casually. Furthermore, Magic Lamp had always been mysterious. There was almost zero news about this author, and most people didn't even know she was a female. A few people only knew that she was a female, but didn't know her looks, since she never took any part in any activities. Especially the rumors about the company and Twitter today. It was rumored that the reason Magic Lamp never took part in events and didn't have any pictures was that she was too ugly. Leonard knew that Theo must have spread this rumor. However, it was not a day or two since this rumor had broken out. Seeing that Magic Lamp's reply was rather cold, Leonard comforted her cautiously.
It's okay. It doesn't matter whether you take part in publicity events. These days, we speak with strength.
After consoling her, he sat back down in his chair, slightly frowning. At the same time, Theo had also received internal news that Pinnacle Studios was cooperating with Evanston's Miller family. Although Theo didn't care much about things and was rather carefree, he had a wide range of connections. The Miller family was an old family in Evanston and had been especially on the rise recently. In Devil City, though he didn't know much about the forces in Evanston, he had still heard of the 4 major families. Working with the Miller family was extremely important. After receiving the internal news, he directly called Miss Yates.
Portia, I have a piece of good news for you. The Miller family wants to work with us through playing comics. There will be an internal test which I'm intending to recommend for you.
Theo crossed his legs. On the other end, Portia was slightly stunned.
The Miller family?
According to the news I obtained, Evanston's 4 major families are even more powerful than the Marshall family. It's an extremely rare opportunity to cooperate with the Miller family.
Theo laughed. Portia knew what kind of person Theo was, and her heart shuddered a little at the mention of the Marshall family. Her hands tightened, and she asked,
"What do I need to prepare?"
She naturally wouldn't let go of such a golden opportunity to cooperate with a big family.
I'll tell you more when we meet tomorrow.
Theo hung up. He had many authors under him, and the most popular ones were Miss Yates and Magic Lamp. He directly signed up for Miss Yates in the internal quota. The next day, early in the morning, Michael woke up early as usual. After he returned from his morning run, Bessy had also just come back. She was lowering her head at the basin and squeezing toothpaste on her toothbrush. Michael came in with a dry towel and instead of immediately taking a shower, he just leaned over from behind. Holding the towel in one hand, he wrapped the other hand around her waist and lowered his head to meet her lips.
I haven't brushed my teeth.
Bessy held up her toothbrush. Michael held her waist, his actions gentle and yet firm. Upon hearing this, he chuckled in a low voice.
It's fine.
He opened the bathroom door and went in to take a shower. Breakfast. Michael finished eating and watched as Bessy drank milk.
I'm going to the city center later. Do you want to come with me?
You can go first. Bessy scrolled through Twitter while drinking milk. Michael didn't reply. After a pause, he glanced at her again and said slowly,
Don't fight with Kenneth.
He thought for a while and continued,
Don't use Giant Crocodile and Matthew to threaten him.
I won't. Bessy looked at the message from Andrea and said lazily, I'm not that kind of person. With Marvin around, Michael wasn't very worried and just nagged a little more.
Be careful on your own. Call me if there's anything.
Bessy didn't bother nodding and gave him a thumbs-up sign. After Michael left to handle his business, Bessy remained at home for another 10 minutes before leaving for the Marshall family's house with Marvin. The Marshall family's house was heavily guarded today, and bodyguards were all around. Portia originally wanted to find Theo, but her car couldn't enter. She stopped at the big intersection and waited for a long time before Theo came out. What's going on? Portia looked past him to the end of the road.
A big figure is coming today.
Theo was the Marshall family's illegitimate son, the 4th son of the Marshall family. He pushed his sunglasses and said casually,
I don't know who it is, but it's not something we can handle anyway. The Marshall family is strictly guarded today, and you can't enter. Let's find another place.
He then left with her. Although shocked, Portia remained silent and only glanced behind him. A black car was driving over at the moment. The bodyguard that had blocked her just now directly let the black car in. Inside this black car were Bessy and Marvin. The road was full of precautions. Marvin slowly stopped the car at the Marshall family's house gate. Mr. Marshall had already taken a few confidants and was standing at the door to welcome them. When the car stopped, he immediately walked over and ushered them in.
Miss Clark,
he greeted Bessy politely. The sun is so bright. Let's go in first. Bessy quickly buckled a hat on her head. Mr. Marshall glanced behind her.
Where's Mr. Clark?
Oh, I forgot to tell you. He isn't coming today. He's busy with other things. Bessy stopped and glanced at him. I'll be handling the matters today.
Mr. Clark isn't coming today?
Upon hearing this, Mr. Marshall and Julius's expressions changed. If Michael wasn't coming today, then how were they going to continue the negotiations? Mr. Marshall didn't know who he was negotiating with this time. He only heard that Patrick was a powerful character and that Michael was involved in the rest of the affairs. Walking in front and seeing that Mr. Marshall and the rest were still standing on the spot, Bessy raised an eyebrow. Is there something else? Let's go in.
Miss Clark, I'll let Julius take you indoors to rest.
Mr. Marshall glanced at her and said solemnly. He obviously didn't intend to bring her to the negotiation scene. It's fine. I'll be coming with you. Bessy put her hand in her pocket. Mr. Marshall was in a serious mood now that Michael wasn't here. He was a little hesitant, but still agreed to it. Beside him, the other family members saw that Mr. Marshall really took Bessy inside and couldn't help but exclaim,
Mr. Marshall! It's okay. It's just one more person.
Mr. Marshall held up his hand and asked them to remain silent. Without Michael this time, the negotiation would definitely fail. Along the way, the Marshall family remained silent, and the atmosphere was heavy. They soon arrived at their destination.